I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting for March 2nd, 2021. Before we get started with our agenda, I will read some notes for the evening. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Let's see. I would like to confirm that members and staff can hear, that members participating remotely can hear and participate. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Melly Milton? Here. Anthony Zaitin?
Here.
Amy Paretsky?
Here.
Michelle Gillespie?
Here.
Great. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Fred Litchfield?
Here.
Kathy Jubert?
Here.
Okay, great. Just covering some quick ground rules. I'll invite each speaker on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants should provide their full name and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly in a way that helps to generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others do so through the chair. Each vote taken by the board will be conducted by roll call vote. After all members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. By phone, dial 9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please note that part of your phone number will be visible to those viewing the meeting. By Zoom, click raise hand on the bottom of your screen and wait to be recognized by the chair. The chair will also ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, the chair will call on each by name and afford approximately 3 minutes for comments, each comment. Okay, first item on our agenda is an executive session relating to litigation. I declare under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3 and 6, that the purpose of the executive session will be to discuss strategy regarding pending litigation concerning property at 222 West Main Street, known as Abo Construction, Inc. and KA Realty versus Town of the Northborough Planning Board, Worcester Superior Court Civil Action Number 1985 CV0. And pending litigation concerning property at 0 and 301 Bartlett Street, known as the Gutierrez Company versus Northborough Planning Board, Land Court Case Number 21 MISC 000046, and that discussion of the foregoing in open session could have a detrimental effect on the litigating and or negotiating position of the town. I will ask for a motion to go into executive session under Chapter 30A, Section 21A3 and 6, for the purposes and reasons declared by the chair, and to return to open session at the conclusion of executive session. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. I will take roll call vote to enter into executive session. Melly Milton?
Yes.
Anthony Zaitin?
Aye.
Amy Paretsky?
Aye.
Michelle Gillespie?
Aye.
And Carrie Martinek is an aye. At this time, we will move into executive session and resume back with our open meeting in about approximately 30 minutes.
All right, so I have.
Good evening again, everybody. We will now return to our open session of the planning board meeting for March 2nd, 2021. First on our agenda, we have continued public hearing, special permit common driveway application for 85 and 95 West Street, map 57, parcels 34 and 35 to construct a common driveway serving 5 lots. I'm going to see if Brian is here. Perhaps not. Kathy, so it sounds like the applicant may not be.
Yeah, well, actually, Carrie, on the agenda, Bartlett Street is first.
Yep, I'm just going to move on to the 85 West Street first because there's just a quick one here.
Okay, so do you still want Dave to?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Dave. I thought you were coming back. I apologize.
No, that's what I'm asking. Do you want him to stay on for 0 Bartlett? That's why I had put it
Oh,
on.
no, that's okay. We'll be continuing, but so you don't have to worry about that.
If for some reason, Kathy, that changes, you can send me a text and I'll rejoin.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay,
Perfect.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so for 85 West Street, I'm just gonna pull up. I think we had a request come in.
Right, and so to answer your question, Carrie, that you just asked me, yeah, I believe that Brian Waterman is not present this evening, but given that Michelle has to recuse herself, if the board has any questions about the continuance, they can ask Michelle.
Oh, that's okay to ask Michelle if we have questions about it?
Yes, it could be, because she's part of the, sort of part of their team.
Oh,
But
okay, sure.
and if you need to talk about it, she needs, she has to obviously recuse herself from the planning board meeting. If you have any questions about it, otherwise, I mean, he simply asked for a continuance to the next meeting, to the
Yeah.
March 16th meeting.
So
Okay, so
Carrie,
look-
either I can excuse myself and exit out and then answer your questions and then come back, or you can just decide how you want to move forward.
Okay, why don't I just read the request, and then if there are any questions beyond that, we'll ask you to participate. But otherwise, why don't we plan on you've recused yourself as of right now?
Okay, thank you.
So for the
Madam
purpose,
Chair, sorry, you do have a hand raised in the attendees from Mark Donahue.
oh
Not
yes,
sure if
thank you.
that's-
Yep, and he's the next one, so we'll get to that next. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Michelle is, for the purpose of the minutes, Michelle Gillespie has recused herself as we move to continue this hearing. We had a request come in, I'm just pulling up here, that they would like to continue, this came from Brian Waterman, the request to continue to March 16th this is in order to let Fred finish his review of the revised materials, and town council also has to review a covenant document. This will give the WDA design group time to reply as needed. And so they are looking to continue to March 16th. That's all that I have there. Kathy, I don't know if that's all the information you have as well.
Yep, that's just that email, that short email, Carrie, that they sent. And just obviously, as you know, when you continue the hearing, it needs a time specific. So just so that you know, on the March 16th so far, the public hearing for 1 Lyman Street has been advertised for 6 o'clock. So you can just, go accordingly after 6 o'clock.
Okay, so board members, would we want to continue at also 6 p.m. in case there are any continuances, and we can just get right to it?
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
And the Waterman Group isn't here tonight? They're not on the line at all?
No,
No, it would have to be Michelle. We'd have to bring her back in. Do you have a question?
Okay.
We should bring Michelle back in?
No, I was just going to ask, and we did it before for another applicant, just to give staff at least a week or 5 days. Like, I know it's a pet peeve of mine when information comes in the morning and staff has to review it during the day and have turnaround for us. And it just gets tricky. I guess I just wanted to ask the applicant just to give a little more lead time. And I know we talked in the past about maybe coming up with some sort of process where anybody who wants to attend our meetings, if they want to get on the agenda, the information needs to be into staff like at least a week in advance, just to be fair, because we have so many applicants right now. And if everybody's bombarding Fred and Kathy in the morning of our meeting, it's a quick turnaround and it doesn't give us time to process. It doesn't give them time to process. That's all I wanted to ask.
Okay. Okay, so with that noted, is there a motion to continue the public hearing for the common driveway application for 85 and 95 West Street to March 16th at 6 p.m.?
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
So motion has been made to continue to March 16th at 6 p.m. Moved and seconded. All in favor, Millie?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
And Carrie's an aye. Okay, hearing's been continued to March 16th at 6 PM. Michelle, if you're able to join us again, and Melanie, as part of the minutes, if you're able to note that Michelle has rejoined the meeting at 6:55. Okay, next I am going to move on to the continued public hearing, definitive subdivision application for 0 Bartlett Street, map 51, parcel 3, and map 66, parcel 16, to construct a 4-lot subdivision. And here I do see Mark on the line, so I'm going to bring Mark over. I don't see anyone else. Well, maybe VHB, I'm not sure. Mark, is that VHB for you or someone different?
Probably somebody different.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for 425.
Oh, no problem. That looks to be it for that. Okay, great. So I did receive a request for a continuance on this application. I wanted to, before we voted to continue, I just wanted to make sure, because this is a subdivision plan and we're on a, Mark, did you want to be seen or are you just on the phone this evening?
Your choice. I don't see
Oh,
an
no, it's
option.
fine.
so
I just didn't know
can't.
if you're having trouble. That's fine, no problem.
No, I don't see one.
So because we're on the timeline of a subdivision, I just wanted to make sure, a couple of things have obviously transpired since we last met. So I want to make sure that if the applicant is interested in getting additional information, that we just have a chance to catch up and make sure that it's going to help progress the application forward so that we can just keep moving forward on it and not, come back 2 weeks from now and find out that we're not looking at we had missed expectations there. So I just wanted to quickly go through, before we vote to continue, just some of the updates that have come through since we last met. I think we all received a memo from the applicant through Attorney Donahue that wanted to just clear up what was perceived to be confusion about subdivision and go through some of the, particularly talking about the Concom component and the 8M permit component, and just had sent over a memo that didn't think that was necessarily part of subdivision law and wanted to, had just mentioned respectfully, did not want to comply with the request for the Concom, and then thought that the 8M permit, they're willing to do that as a condition. As part of that, it was suggested by Attorney Donahue that if there are any questions about the correspondence, that I speak to town council to get his thoughts on it. So I wanted to actually update the board and the applicant that I did do that. I had the chance to talk to council. I wanted to let Attorney Donahue know that, I took these comments seriously, and I wanted to make sure that the board was looking at subdivision rules and regs properly and fairly to speak to your concerns over a few of the components that we talked about last time. So that's one thing I wanted to update you on. We also received a memo from Timon, Davis, and Duffy that the board received, and I think it is obviously a public document for anybody to look at, that had really gone into the issue of ownership and had provided a couple of different cases to look at, primarily around ownership, that I'd also had the chance to talk to council about. So to update everybody on the status from council, just in speaking with him the other day, we talked about a couple of Attorney Donahue's concerns about the subdivision rules and regs. And I think that the overall message was that it's not that our rules and regs are not in compliance with the state rules and regs, but that I think, we want to be judicious in the way that we apply them and make sure that we're not just stuck on one point, and, we want to make sure that we're fair to the applicant. And in looking at our rules and regs, do we want to say just because you didn't submit this, is that, if the board's wishes were to deny, which I'm not saying that's the case, would that be grounds for that? Would we want to say, because you didn't put in a Concom information, is that something we'd really want to pursue or not? So we'd have to really think about that in looking at our rules and regs. The other component was obviously as it relates to the permit. And this gets into a little bit more about what Attorney Timon had sent over. I had the opportunity to talk to counsel about the rules and regs as they relate to ownership. And we took a look at what's our definition for applicant, what's our definition for owner, and how do we determine if our subdivision plans are meeting that requirement of ownership? I think one thing that was presented in the Timon and Davis letter was really, there were obviously 3 different cases, but fundamentally what it was looking at was that a planning board regulation requiring the applicant be an owner of record is a reasonable regulation. And what we had talked about as a possible component of this application is if the board wanted to see anything as it relates to ownership. That I wanted to make sure, Mark, that you were aware of that as well, because I want you to share what information you think the board needs going forward, but also, talk to you a little bit about if we need anything there on the ownership component, so that when we come back in a couple of weeks, we're not starting over somewhere, which is, really, I just wanted to have an open conversation about that a little bit and give you a chance to talk about what information you'd like to pursue.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. The information that we're talking about is we've talked to the board, and the board, either collectively or individuals, have indicated a desire to have clarification of the Conservation Commission's review and approval of the subdivision, and have the so-called 8M permit. And we provided the letter as to what our position is. But we're still going to endeavor to try to clarify the record for the board as part of that. Whether we technically need to, it's appropriate for a responsible applicant to do that. So we're trying to work with the appropriate individuals to try to clarify that, or perhaps help the board better understand why, in the case of the Conservation Commission, it would be deleterious to the applicant. So we'll pull that information together, probably be talking with the conservation agent, perhaps getting some information from them, and also speaking with the Commonwealth with regard to both the 8M permit and the issues raised by Attorney Timon. We haven't had much time to digest Attorney Timon's letter, which we appreciate getting a copy of. There are some issues that will be appropriately provided, and to take Ms. Paretsky's point, we'll make sure to provide our written response to that well in advance of the board's next meeting. So if the board desires, it can share it with town council to get some thoughts. Suffice it to say, we don't agree. Some of the cases cited, in fact, have been reversed since then. So we'll put it all into a comprehensive correspondence, get it to you early next week, so you can digest it and refer it in any fashion you want. So I expect that we'll have that information available and be able to go forward at the next meeting.
Okay, so just so I'm clear then, we're looking at, you want to provide more context on the Concom piece. Is that number 1?
That's correct.
Okay, and number 2 is you're pursuing the 8M piece, or you're pursuing a similar, I was a little unclear on that action, if you could just clarify.
I certainly want to be clear that we're not committing to provide it. We're pursuing what clarification we could get from the Commonwealth, whether that includes the 8M, whether something short of that or not is still conjecture. So we're not conceding that it needs to be done, but we're trying to get you more information to resolve your objective questions.
Okay, and then looking at, you're responding to the issue of ownership.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Does that make sense? Does that sound like that would allow us to continue to progress this application forward? Should we come back on the 16th?
On your issue, your questions about ownership, Carrie, are you talking about ownership of the part that actually belongs to the MWRA that they want to build the road over?
Correct.
Needed to be present during the meetings, or?
Well,
that-
that's a good question. So in Attorney Timon's letter, he's suggesting that based on the ownership, based on the rules and regs requirement of ownership, that the MWRA should actually join the subdivision application as a co-applicant.
Okay, that's what I was questioning. Okay.
And is that what you're referring, as part of what you're addressing, Mark, whether or not that's something that you would pursue or not pursue?
Well, I think it'd be fair, Madam Chair, that what we're going to do is reply to Attorney Timon's letter with our position, the reason for the continuance is our position isn't fully evolved right now because we only got this letter Thursday
That's
evening.
okay. Yep, that's okay.
So we'll provide our response and move accordingly to try to get the board the information it needs to grant approval.
Okay.
Right, so I think, let's see. As part of the conversation about ownership and it being a reasonable requirement, that at some level, there should be some sort of MWRA involvement. So I think that whatever form that comes in, just speaking to Attorney Donahue, it sounds like you're still formulating that, but at least, I want to make sure that that known issues out there so that we can address it the next time and we don't have to delay any further.
As I indicated, we have Attorney Timon's letter, so the issue is certainly known. We'll
Okay.
provide a reply as to whether we agree with his conclusion that it's required, and or in conjunction, as I said, whether it's required under the rules and regulations or not. Try to get you some clarification from the Commonwealth via the MWRA.
Okay. Any other board questions?
No.
No.
Okay, so, go ahead.
And I don't know if it's something we talk about this time or next week, but or next month. When Attorney Donahoe said he's going to talk to Concom and the Concom agent, one thing I was looking at when you look at this subdivision is they showed 2 lots, H1 and I think it's B2 as being developable. And I know time and time again he says it's only the road, but when I read the subdivision rules and regulations, it calls for a preliminary sketch of where the house is going to be or the building. I mean, it talks about house because these rules and regulations sound like they talk about neighborhoods. And so what I feel is different from the Concom is they're saying that there was 1 warehouse, but now if you really want a subdivision with 4 lots, 2 of them are buildable. And I think Concom with their NOI only looked at 1 buildable lot.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if it's a subdivision, what you're really going for, I think the Concom would have to know that 2 of those lots are, and possibly 3 or 4. And what do you on the? Sometimes when you meet with us, you say it's just the road. It's just the road, but on the drawing there's 4 lots. So I just want to know. Be clear. You're just going for a road here. Or are you going for a road and 4 lots and probably building on 2 or 3 of them? I guess that's to Mark. Because I'm sure the road is going to go somewhere.
Through you, Madam Chair. Candidly, I came expecting only to address the issue of the continuance. And I'm a little concerned about trying to get into the substance of it for a hearing that we've asked for a continuation on. So I have Ms. Pereski's questions. I think I understand the tenor of them, and we can certainly try to provide a reply, but trying to do it right now, I think might be going a little far afield of the continuation that's before the board.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought since you were going to meet with Concom, you'd want to know my question.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like then, in that case, that would hopefully put us on a good path. And as part of continuing, it looks like we also have a component of that is a granted extension to April 7th I think. Was that the extension?
That's correct.
Okay, so let me just pull this up so I have all the pieces of it. I apologize. I thought I had it up.
It's an extension for the date of the decision to April 7th. Is
Okay, so you're confirming that anyway. I think Kathy, you saw that as well, the 7th. I just can't find the paper right now.
Yeah, they came, it came through in an email as a letter from Mr. Donahue.
Okay. Okay, great. So why don't then, I think that helps to just get everybody on the same page and clarify for next steps. So in that spirit, is there a motion to continue 0 Bartlett subdivision application for map 51 parcel 3 and map 66 parcel 16 to construct a 4-lot subdivision to March 16th? Do we have to put the continued the extension into the motion or no?
You should do it as 2 motions. So one to
Okay.
continue the hearing. Why don't you do the extension first and then continue the hearing?
Okay, so a motion then to accept the extension to April 7th for a decision on the subdivision application for 0 Bartlett Street, map 51, parcel 3, and map 66, parcel 16 to construct a 4-lot subdivision.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Michelle?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
And carries an aye. Okay, the second component is to continue the hearing for the same subdivision application to March 16th. Why don't we say 6 p.m. just in case we have any issues? So March 16th at 6 p.m.
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
Second, is that a second, Michelle?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, Millie?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And carries an aye. Okay, great. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the 16th.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, moving along, we have the continued public hearing for 425 Whitney Street, special permit site plan approval and special permit for groundwater protection overlay district. And why don't I bring in, let's see. All right, who should I plan to, oh, Scott Turner, it looks like, from Environmental Partners. Should I bring in? Hi, Stephen, are you on the line?
Yes, good evening.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can. So it looks
Okay.
like, am I bringing in all the peer review team at this point?
Yeah, actually, Carrie, there should be, Scott can verify this, but there should be Scott Turner from Environmental Partners. There is a Jane, actually, I don't see,
That would be
Oh,
Jane
Mike-
Davis, Kathy.
Jane Davis, I'm sorry, thanks, Scott. Jane
Yep.
Davis from Environmental Partners. And actually, who else, Scott?
Don Flaherty from CN Associates.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Mike Corelli, is he coming?
Yes, as well, as far as the applicant, we have Attorney Mattos, Mr. Whitehouse, and yeah, Mr. Corelli. And there may be others from Steris, I'm not sure, but
That should be, that's everybody, I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's Stephen.
Okay, great. So we have 3 peer reviewers here. It looks like we have Scott, Jane, and the third one is Dawn. And the board should have received, I'm just going to switch over. The board should have received 3 different letters from each peer reviewer that came in. So I just want to make sure everybody has 3. There's 2 from Environmental Partners and 1 from CN Associates. So if everyone just make sure they have the right materials right now. Okay, and Scott, why don't unless Kathy, there's anything logistical we have to take care of. Scott, if you wanted to, you're the project lead or the peer review lead?
That's correct.
If you wanted to maybe introduce your team or anything you want to say before you get started and diving into the actual presentation or just review of the letters?
Sure. My name is Scott Turner. My position is Director of Planning at Environmental Partners. I'm a registered professional engineer and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I'm the lead on this project, and through discussions with Kathy and in response to your request for proposals, I led the civil site stormwater portion of the review. So that letter, you should see a letter from me dated February 25th, 2021. That is a letter that I authored. Also with me today from Environmental Partners is Jane Davis. Jane is a project manager in our traffic and transportation group. So she did a review of the transportation memorandum, and she can speak to items regarding traffic and transportation. And then we also contracted with CN Associates, and CN Associates has a very specialized practice. As far as I can tell, it is national, if not international. And they specialize in, I guess, radiation and the type of equipment and machinery that is proposed at the proposed building. So Don can speak to his letter regarding his review of the materials regarding the use and how the use operates, and his opinion regarding the its appropriateness, the appropriateness of the submittals based on his understanding of the use. Since it's our first time here in front of you, I don't know how you typically proceed. Our letters are somewhat lengthy. I don't know if you want us to go point by point or just give a brief overview. I know that from the civil sites, stormwater side, we have a lot, I had a lot of comments that were, some of them were questions, some of them were confirmation. I did not see anything in my review that I guess gave me considerable concern about the project. I think that our comments are mostly, or my comments were mostly minor. The stormwater report was done consistent with standard engineering practice. We had some minor comments regarding standard details and so forth. We reviewed it for consistency with your zoning bylaw, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion about zoning based on the documents that I had reviewed. But again, I think that most of my comments were asking for some more details. I did have a comment regarding site lighting, and that site lights be provided. See, had some questions regarding landscaping. Kathy didn't ask us to do didn't ask us to hire a landscape architect, but there's some landscaping around the proposed loading area. Looks like there could be a little bit more, but again, I'm not a landscape architect. I did not do a detailed, nor did we hire a landscape architect to review the project. I had some comments regarding the parking spaces, and typically what you see is for many planning boards to provide parking that is necessary for the project and not necessarily what is required by zoning. And so I had some questions about possibly reducing the amount of parking on site, given the fact that they've indicated they only required 20 parking spaces. Had a comment about driveway width. Bicycle facilities. I didn't see any bicycle facilities on the plans, which was asked for in your zoning bylaw. And then with regards to stormwater management, Most of my comments were regarding stormwater pollution prevention plan that is typically that would be required for a project of this size, and asked for some documentation about erosion and sedimentation control and stormwater, and again, the stormwater pollution prevention plan. That's requirement of the NPDS, US EPA's NPDS program. Had a question about the location of the warehouse expansion. I know that this was I reviewed it for consistency. I reviewed the plans for consistency with the wetlands protection bylaw. It appeared to me that the warehouse expansion might be a little close, might be 33 feet. And my read of the wetlands protection bylaw is that it needs to be 35 feet. We had some standards regarding the infiltration basin, comments about drain manhole that needs to be oversized, comment about remodeling the French drain that collects stormwater generated by the roof. Some comments about the construction entrance. Had one comment about a potential low spot on the property that perhaps they might need another catch basin for. And then in terms of additional civil site comments, made a comment about perhaps having granite curb at the entrance. Had a question about trash disposal, and then a question about the status of the design of the sewer force main. So do a lot of peer reviews and prepare design plans for a lot of projects. Many of these comments I would consider to be, adjustments to details and perhaps some answers to some questions. But in general, from a civil site perspective, the project seems well designed and consistent with standard practice. So I'm happy to take questions if you have any questions, or happy to turn it over to Jane to talk about traffic.
Just in terms of putting into context, so I just want to make sure this is something that you received. I see you have a memo dated from March 11th, but I just want to make sure that it's actually, I thought it was the 10th. So we had compiled all of the questions that we wanted addressed as part of peer review. And it's the March 10th memo. Kathy, is that went over as March 11th, or is that a different document?
Carrie, I think on that one, if I remember correctly, the cover of it had one date. Then when you went to the second page, it had a different date that was just off by a day, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay. Okay, so would the board want to pause and ask any questions, or would you like to continue and just hear additional information?
I guess my only question would be for staff. Fred, did you have a chance to read it over, and are these all things that you feel like could be made changes, like the stormwater and the? I just didn't know if staff had a chance to read it, and if these are all. I guess it would be up to the applicant too, if these are all changes that could be incorporated.
For you, Chair, I did read the letter. I do think that the applicant could easily make all of these changes and make the plans 100% complete. I don't see any issues with any of them. I think the one comment about the Conservation Commission wetland setback pertains to the fact that I believe the Conservation Commission amended their bylaw to increase that setback from the disturbed area to the wetland from 25 feet to 35 feet. So I think they may have been in compliance at the time they went to the Conservation Commission, but since then the commission, I believe, has changed that, increased that setback to 35 feet. So they would be pre-existing compliant.
And Carrie, if I can just add in general, as far as the three review letters, they were all read and reviewed by staff, which included myself, the town engineer, the building inspector, and the DPW director. And then these 3 letters were also obviously not only forwarded to you, but after they were forwarded to the board, they were forwarded to the applicant. So I am going to assume that, the applicant at an appropriate time tonight will respond to these
Sure.
review letters.
Stephen, did you want to respond at all now, or do you want to wait until the end, or anything you'd like to add or comment on?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, we did have an opportunity to read the 3 letters, and we were pleased that there were no showstoppers, if you will. There are a number of items I think that could be characterized as kind of cleanups of labeling on the plan or appropriate documentation, all of which we're ready to close out. There are a couple items, though, of course, like the driveway width. We have a pre-existing driveway. I would assume the planning board does not want us to narrow the driveway for the interest of public safety off of that straightaway, that we would preserve the pre-existing width of the drive. So items like that, I think we'd have to see what's the will of the board. Does it make sense? But most of them, we can certainly narrow the issues with our response. And interested to hear from the planning board, which of these, if there's any that you think are either not appropriate, or you want to just hear from us as we narrow it down and give you our responses to each of these items.
Mm-hmm.
We're already pursuing, I know we're going to get to traffic next, but we're already pursuing the additional information that's required from that peer review letter.
Okay. I'm wondering if a lot of my questions actually go to the radiation part. I think otherwise, just in general, I thought there was a group, the Waltham something, doing a noise study. I don't know if that was ever submitted. Now I can't. What's the name of the group doing the noise study?
That the applicant was doing, or
Yes.
I don't know. The applicant could probably respond.
Tech Environmental of Waltham was preparing an acoustical study of the property and of the applicant's proposed operation. So I don't know if that made it into the.
No, that wasn't part of the peer review.
It's in the book.
The sound.
I'm just looking in the book, this giant book.
Oh, in the okay, all right.
So I don't, does that not exist?
Perhaps Steve or
If I may, through the chair, I don't recall. I remember meeting with the sound engineer for the acoustic study, and it must have been pre-COVID because we were together on the site. And I don't actually, I'll have to get more information as to what the status of that study was, whether the impact of COVID made the pursuit of the data, less relevant or something. I just don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll have to close that out and find out. Sorry.
Okay, and then another question I had for this one, you had mentioned just needing a copy of what kind of lighting plan were you looking for, Scott? I think we have the photometric plan, but was there something different you were looking for?
I was looking for just details of what the lights were going to look like, and how tall the light poles were, details on those types of things. I saw the photometric plan, but it was hard to tell what fixtures they were using. So typically we like to see, and I don't know, I cannot recall whether your bylaw requires this or not, but light fixtures that are dark skies compliant, so that they're just shooting down and not shooting out or up.
we don't have any reference to dark skies in our current bylaw, Scott, but the design review committee does require that, obviously that there's no spillage of light over onto any abutting property. And they did review this, but if I can, go through the file and either follow up with you on that, or the applicant can provide the additional information.
Okay, are there other questions from the board? I don't want to be the only. Any other questions on this particular one?
If I may, through the chair, we can get the light details to you. That shouldn't be a problem.
Oh, great, thanks. Just one other question I had for you, Scott. You went through a lot of different calculations here and talking about runoff and things like that. So to be added to the site, it will be a concrete plant that's going to be put on the site for 12 to 8 months as a temporary structure. Will that change your numbers, or what's the impact on the numbers that we're looking at here?
So we're only able to review what was submitted. Typically, when you look at stormwater management, you look at the existing condition and you look at the proposed condition. And then you also look at erosion controls to make sure that sedimentation and erosion are handled properly during construction. You don't typically look at runoff rates during construction, because construction is a fluid process and it is always changing. So if they had some type of concrete structure on the site, my guess is that it would it'd be consistent with typical construction processes. And again, during construction, what is most concerned is that sediment and erosion is addressed, and the documentation that they provided seems to address that. I did have a couple comments regarding the construction entrance and asked for a couple of changes there, but again, it's just in the details. I asked for thicker stone, or bigger stone, and a thicker pad, just to make sure that any sediment erosion that are on trucks that are leaving the site falls off into the pad prior to getting out on the roads. And I think that's a pretty reasonable request.
Okay, and sorry, where is that in this paper? Page?
So that would be towards,
Oh, is it towards the end here? Oh, I think no.
yeah. It would be on page 5. Question number 7 towards the bottom. We recommend the stabilized construction exit detail be revised to include 2 to 3 inches of stone and depth be increased to 6 inches to 6 inches. The reason for it, again, is the bigger the stone, the more voids that are there. And when you have stone that's too small, and you have sediment falling off the trucks, it can silt up the pad. So.
And Carrie, if I could just add, if I'm not mistaken, the after this is through the site plan review process, the applicant needs to go to the earthwork board, and that's where some of the comments that Mr. Turner made about the driveway pad and so forth. Those are conditions of the permit that the earthwork board would issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, additional questions here? No. Okay, we also had questions as part of our review that we're going to council. So at some point we'll have to figure out how to incorporate that into our review as well, Kathy. I don't know, obviously not as part of this meeting, but.
Yeah, they have not been provided, and that may be as simple as, how long ago it was requested and it's, may have fallen through his cracks.
Okay, because one impactful question that I think really, and I do keep bringing this up because I want to make sure we solve it, is just the clarification on temporary structures, and if temporary and permanent structures should be all part of site plan review. I know there's a preference by staff to do otherwise, but I think we need to understand, is that part of site plan review or not? Because I just want to make sure that we're looking at the full picture here. So that's a question that we should probably get finalized sooner rather than later.
Well, I'll follow up with him tomorrow or Thursday as far as, getting this back on his radar.
Okay, let's see. I'm just looking at March 10th. Anything else? Okay, Scott, does it make sense to move on to the traffic component? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Oh, one point you just mentioned, I'm sorry. You said that you're still ongoing. So you're still addressing other components right now. Did you already mention what they were, or is it a matter of getting more information, or are you still looking at other components?
Well, what we typically do is, for a peer review, is we typically look at the information that's provided. And, we ask for some additional details, and it all depends on the response and how much more you want us to be involved with the project. So we'll leave that up to you folks. Okay. It all depends. Sometimes, we provide advice for boards and commissions and so forth, and we leave it up to you as to what you want to take from it and what you want to leave behind, so to speak.
Great, thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Okay, moving on then to traffic.
Okay. Jane, do you want to press traffic?
I'm here. Yes, I'm Jane Davis from Environmental Partners, and I am a project manager in the transportation department. I reviewed the memo prepared by VAI, and we also didn't really have any substantial comments, mostly just some clarifications, which were all related to the trip generation. VAI did a somewhat reduced scope for their memo, presumably based on the assumption that they were comparing the previous usage to the proposed usage, and the proposed usage based on their calculations will actually generate less trips than what was there previously. And so that was one of our questions, was when did the previous occupant vacate? Because if it was recent, then that seems fair that they would be able to make a comparison between the two. If it was 5 or 10 years ago, may want to look at the project independently and not as a side-by-side comparison. So that was one of our questions that kind of has a domino effect on the other questions as far as trip generation goes. There was a question that we had about the occupied space square footage that they used versus the total space. Typically you use the total square footage to determine what the trip generation would be using the ITE methodology, and they did not use the square footage that is, I guess, being allotted for storage and warehouse space. And so we just wanted a clarification on what standards, where that came from, if this was a unique type of development, if there was a reason why they would be able to take that out and get that credit for that. So that was one of our questions regarding the trip generation. And then the other was really just about the methodology. So ITE looks at different data points of different size developments in the same category. This one is general light industry, I think. And then based on that, they create a curve that you use to estimate the number of trips of the proposed development. And there's 2 different methodologies that you can use. And in this case, data points don't necessarily point to one over the other. So an argument can be made to go either way. And we were just kind of asking for some clarification on that, because typically when that's the case, you would use the higher generation to be conservative, and it appears that they use the lower generation, which is negligible in some instances, different peak periods and overall daily trips, and then a little more substantial on others. So we're asking for clarification on that as well. But overall, you know, without they did not do traffic analysis. Without the traffic analysis, we really can't say what the impact on the roadways will be. But you know, it equates to about one vehicle every 2 to 3 minutes. So assuming that the intersections and the surrounding area are not already congested, that we wouldn't anticipate that being a problem. But again, we can't really verify that without the actual traffic analysis. So I think that's it for traffic. Just a couple questions and clarifications on the trip generation.
Okay, and Stephen, you're aware of the items of that have been requested?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I expect that Vinace VAI will have no problem providing the clarifications. And so I think we've already sent this off to them to get started.
Great. Any questions from board members? Or obviously staff as well? Like Kathy, I know you mentioned you read it already. Any question from board members on the traffic study or review? Nope. Okay, great. Jean, I don't know if you can answer this. Well, I guess in terms of once you receive the information, I guess you could answer this. It doesn't matter. Once you receive all the information, do you just update this letter? Is that what your next step would be?
Yeah, we would issue a second review and indicate if there were any open comments or if everything's been closed to our satisfaction. And we are also, I don't know what is easier for you, but we're also happy to coordinate directly with Jeff Dirk at VA. We have done that in other instances to just kind of iron out the kinks instead of, you know, going back and forth and having the board be a middleman. So it's really up to what the board's preference is, but we are happy to do that if that's something you would like.
Okay. Any comments or thoughts from the board on this one? Okay, so I think then we are moving on to Don. Don, are you there?
I'm there, yes.
Okay, great.
My name is Don Flaherty. I am, as it said, I'm with C & Associates. We're a radiological consulting company based in Manchester, Massachusetts. I'm the Director of Operational Health Physics. So a little bit about my background. I'm a plenary member of the Health Physics Society. I'm a fellow of the American Academy of Health Physics, and I'm board certified by the American Board of Health Physics comprehensively. So I've been conducting health physics for about 40 years. Specifically, if you've never been involved with health physics, it's a subset of physics involved with essentially working with people to be able to work with radioactive materials and radiation safely. That's what we do. So in this case, for this peer letter that we've provided to you, I've narrowed my review specifically to the installation of the M4H X-ray pellet bunker for sterilizing this, planned to be used for sterilizing medical products. In my letter to you, you see the list of the technical and the regulatory documents that I reviewed as part of my peer review. And so essentially the work here I'm focused on is the installation of this X-ray pallet bunker. And essentially what that is that involves installing two linear accelerators, which I won't get too much into the technical weeds, but you accelerate over a short distance electrons. And those electrons by themselves could sterilize the medical devices, or they could interact with a target that would emit X-rays that could do the same. So it depends how the application is. And in this case, it's two of those units that are planned to be installed. And you see the 7.5 MeV, which is a term for the energy of electrons, and 500 kilowatt power to the unit. Specifically, and I cite the Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations for control of radiation. And this particle accelerators, if you look on page 2, about halfway down, this is citing those regulations. Particle accelerators fall under the Commonwealth regulations for a radiation machine. So what I'm saying is this machine falls under the Commonwealth regulations. It's not an unregulated device. And the regulations require being registered. It's literally almost like a license to have it. And there's a whole lot of pieces that comes with that. And so the company STERIS needs to submit an application for registration and meet all of the Commonwealth's requirements to register that device. And I understand that's not happened yet. I'm assuming because the sequence is to get the planning board's approval before they go to the state. Otherwise, I would imagine the state would say, do that first, and then you could give us your plans. STERIS can speak to that more effectively. And then it also requires, those regulations at the bottom of page 2 require the applicant to submit a plan review. So arrangements, installations, and all of that have to be submitted to the agency for the state or for the Commonwealth. So that all has to play, and that has not happened yet because it's premature to do that, but that will be coming up. And I just mention these because all of the controls from the state come into play as you apply for registry and as you submit your plans. Those come into play, and then the state, the Commonwealth, reviews those and determines whether they will provide that registry, whether they will approve those plans. Shielding is required for this type of unit, and the regulations speak to that. And I did receive technical information and a shielding calculation that was provided, that was STERIS provided through a third party, MEVEX, provided this shielding calculation for this bunker. And as you probably understand better than most, these linear accelerators are inside a shielded bunker, which is inside a building. And so the calculations provided to me were external to the bunker, not external to the building. So it's closer into the source, which is what I would want to see. And those calculations, the design of those calculations was to ensure by design that this device would not have radiation exposure rates external to the bunker, not the building, but inside to the bunker, that would not exceed 0.5 microsieverts per hour. That's a unit of radiation exposure that I can bore you with or talk about if you want, but that's the design criteria, that it will be less than that. And in doing so, that will keep the radiation exposure to members of the public, which is the most limiting radiation exposure limit provided by the Commonwealth, would be members of the public as opposed to radiation workers themselves. They're allowed a higher radiation exposure. So members of the public is the most limiting exposure limit. And this bunker, the calculations were designed so that the radiation dose rate would be limited to 0.5 or no more than 0.5 microsieverts per hour. And if you follow that radiation dose rate, the rate at which that exposure is being emitted, a worker or person would have to be at that point for 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, just to reach up to that limit for members of the public. And there's also an instantaneous rate limit. That number by design is less than that. And so I found that the design calculations are consistent with meeting the Commonwealth's regulations for annual dose limits to members of the public. And I quote those regulations there and come to that conclusion. So the Commonwealth also has regulations requiring there be training and there be procedures for emergency and normal operations, et cetera, when you're operating a radiation machine. And I was provided with a description of the training requirements and a list of the operating procedures that would be implemented upon being able to be registered, this device registered with the Commonwealth and put in place. I've not actually reviewed those actual training materials or those procedures. They were not provided, but again, that's something that the Commonwealth will most likely review when they go through their process. So in summary, that information that's provided, and that's kind of my last paragraph, I can kind of read it a little bit to you. I think it's material in the content and the quality is consistent with the regulations for the Commonwealth, that the applicant has to follow the state regulations, and those state regulations, Commonwealth regulations, really are cradle to grave. They start from the application process through the planning, through the installation and operation of that. And so that process of approval through the Massachusetts regulatory process would be expected to ensure all those requirements are met. Hope I didn't bore you with too much detail, but I can certainly entertain questions if I can.
No, not at all. Any initial thoughts or questions from the board?
I do have one or two questions so far, and it is maybe on some of the details of just how these things operate. But you talk about the MEVEX accelerator maybe having 2 operational beams at 7.5. What does the MEV stand for? I'm not sure. And that the bunker design is what actually limits what is going out. If the machine goes higher than the 7.5 operational beam, does that increase the amount that comes out through the building, through the bunker, or is that I guess what I'm asking is, if the machine is set at a higher number, does that emit more radiation outside the bunker?
Yes, it would, but by design, and Steris and other folks can speak to this, and as you look at these different particle accelerators, they're designed at certain power levels for a reason, okay? Mm-hmm. So, and so this one is designed to go, as I would understand their design, and they can speak to it, from 0 up to 7.5 million electron volts. That's a unit for describing the energy in these little tiny subatomic electrons, okay? And it can operate actually in that range. It doesn't have to go all the way up to 7.5 MeV. It can operate lower at that, but that's the maximum operating power that it's designed to do.
Oh, that is the maximum.
Yeah, it is. And if you get into this, and these folks can speak to it better because that's their area of expertise, they may not need to operate at that high if the medical equipment that they're looking to sterilize is a low density material that doesn't need the full power to basically kill whatever bacteria or something that might be on that surgical tubing or whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. So, okay. But the 7.5 is the maximum. And also there's a reason why it's the maximum. And that is so that if you go up around above, I think it's around 10 MeV, you can actually make things radioactive. And they don't want that to happen. So when you limit particle accelerators down in the 7.5 MeV range, the radiation that's created is when they're on, and it's gone when they're turned off. And there's no activation is what we call it. They're not making anything radioactive at that limited power level. You can make linear accelerators powerful enough to actually produce radioactive material that remains afterwards. This is not that case.
Okay, so the machine itself is limited to 7.5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You know, and yeah. the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you know, they continue to monitor and regulate people who have registered devices. It's not like they give them the registry and tell them, okay, you can operate this device and we'll never see you again. That's not how the Commonwealth works. They have routine processes where they follow up and inspect the proper operation, et cetera, of whether it's this device or other devices. The same thing applies to the x-ray machine at your dental office. It does. Yeah.
Did you have another question, Millie?
No, he just answered it actually within the other question. So that was it for me.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Please.
So, just a couple of questions, and if any of this is covered and I just missed it, I apologize. But so the first thing is how wide is this beam? Is it a circle? Is it does it spread over space, or is it like a laser?
I can speak limited to it because I'm not the designer, but my investigation is internal to the unit, internal to the shielding. It's like a conveyor belt. You can have like a conveyor belt where, you know, these medical devices are made as clean as they can make them, and then they're sealed in plastic, and then they're put inside a box, and then they're brought to this facility, and they go in the conveyor belt, and then they go inside the shielding where you can't get to, and then the beam of electrons is exposed to it. And it's like a curtain. So it's not a straight one line of beams. It's like a beam that moves typically back and forth and forms like a curtain. So it's enough to interact with the entire box. And typically why they have two of these units is they're opposing so that you don't have to flip the box around or turn it. One can get one side of the box, one can get the other side of the box, and they can penetrate through the box and through the plastic and actually kill germs all the way inside, so that then when it comes out, now you have something sealed in a box, sealed in plastic that's sterilized. And so then there's no way of, until you open the packaging, you can't recontaminate it because it was sterilized after it was packaged. But it's like to answer your question, Anthony, it's, as I understand it, you know, how these are designed, it's like a curtain of them. The width, maybe Steris can that can be variable. It's the width that's needed to irradiate to kill the germs in that box. And that can probably vary depending on the size of the object that is going through the system. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Well, yeah, I guess it helps to some degree. Do you know if once that beam hits the shield, does it just kind of die there, or does it bounce around inside of the chamber? Or?
Sure. If the electrons get through there's a target, you know, the electrons get stopped 100%. In the process of stopping the electrons, X-rays are produced. Okay, and then the shielding stops the X-rays inside the unit, up to where the external radiation dose rate is the numbers, and you see in here the maximum that they have to verify this when they operate the unit. That comes with the whole registration requirements from the Commonwealth. They have to verify. They just can't have a design and calculate the numbers and assume they are. They're not allowed to do that. They'll have to actually verify it with real radiation readings when they first operate the unit. And assuming, you know, this is a standard design, so it wouldn't be expected to do anything any different than as it's designed, because it's not, you know, the prototypical is not the first one of these that's ever made. Okay, they're installing a standard design. So I would expect the dose rates outside on the external of the unit to be as stated in the MEVEX Corporation calculations. And they calculate the dose rate, and there's a lot of physics involved in calculating that, but they calculate the dose rate at a number of points, you know, around this bunker. This bunker's got various points. It's got the front wall, the back wall, what goes toward the roof, what goes out to the left and right, et cetera. And they calculated at all those points. And then I looked at their calculations. The maximum number they calculate is 0.41 microsieverts per hour. And it's, you know, their design is to be less than 0.5. So they're around roughly 80%. You know, in other words, they're like 20% 20% below their design limit and that's only on 2 locations. They have a couple places that are about 0.21 microsieverts per hour, and then most of them are less than 0.1, which is basically just about not measurable. So, yeah, and that's inside the building on the external to the bunker. That's not outside the building in the street where someone's mowing a lawn or driving by. That, you know, this is inside the building up against the bunker. So it's quite conservative.
So there must be a calculation for how thick the concrete or shield would have to be at any given point based upon the strength of the accelerator itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what's done. And they're actually pretty complex. And that's in this case, probably Monte Carlo calculations, which are very accurate for shield design. And the model looks at the energy of the electron, the power of the beam, and what the distance is to, and what target, what it's hitting, what it's interacting with. And these units particularly put a certain type of metal, which will stop the electrons cold. They're not leaving the inside of that unit. They'll interact, but it's the nature of the electrons. It deposits all its energy in a very short period when it interacts with something. The X-rays can go farther. That's why there's all of this extra shielding to stop the X-rays to a certain value outside of the bunker.
Okay. And then you refer to these as being a fairly common facility. And if I remember correctly, way early on in the discussions, there was only maybe like one in functional in the world. Or what's your experience with this type of operation that's similar to what Steris is doing?
Well, my research shows that these are common.
Okay.
I don't have the production numbers for Steris, but so they could provide that on how many this particular unit. But you know, these linear accelerators are not that uncommon. There's a broad range. If you look at Mevex Corporation, who did these calculations, if you look at their website, and I have, you can see where they produce a range of linear accelerators. And these are, you know, 2.5 feet long and 6 inches in diameter. They're not big things, you know. And their website shows their engineers around the 100th one they made. That's one photo I saw. So Mevex, I think, is a Canadian company that makes these kinds of units. So I'm sure their customers are more than just Steris. But, you know, these units are more and more being used all the time. You know, you can sterilize medical equipment with, what's the gas?
Ethylene oxide.
Pardon me?
Ethylene oxide.
Ethylene oxide, yes. So, and they use so you can have a lot of ethylene oxide to kill the bacteria or whatever the microorganisms are. You can use straight radioactive sources. This is a radiation machine. When you turn it off, the radiation's gone. That's the advantage. Mm-hmm. You can use radiation sources, gamma rays, and that was done back in like the 50s and before. But, you know, the really high energy gamma rays tend to damage, you know, like the thing you're trying to irradiate to kill the germs, like the surgical tubing. You don't want it damaged. You just want to kill the microorganisms that might infect us when they use that in surgery for us, or et cetera. Inject us with that hypodermic needle. So these devices were created originally in the 50s. They weren't powerful enough at that time to do the job. And so the world would sterilize things with ethylene oxide, which is still an acceptable way, it's just a different way, or with gamma radiation from radioactive sources, okay? But then as the technology moved along and they were able to improve the design of these particle accelerators, these are, started becoming more desired because of their advantages. You know, they don't make things radioactive. They don't emit radiation when you turn them off, just like the X-ray machine. in your dentist's office doesn't, unless they turn it on, there's no x-rays, and nothing becomes radioactive afterwards. So that's good. And then there's the advantages of the particle beam. It's strong enough to go through plastic wrapping and boxes, but not strong enough to go through all the shielding and come out in the street. You stop it. And then the x-rays that are generated from stopping it can be further stopped by that shielding. So it doesn't, they're less likely to damage what they're, and it's faster, and that's the advantage too. They don't have to irradiate something for hours. It might be more like minutes.
Okay, thanks for the clarity. I have no more questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, other questions? Millie?
I have one also on the machine. What is typically the primary source of the electrons? It's a type of metal, right? Generally?
Well, the linear accelerator is an electric device which can accelerate an electron. If we remember from school, an atom, it's got the nucleus and it's got those big protons and neutrons in the middle of it, and it's got electrons going around sort of like an orbit, like a planet around the sun. And this device can get an electron, which they're really tiny, to travel from one point to another inside the device because it creates enough voltage to accelerate it. Okay, and it'll accelerate that electron and get it going to where it's, what we refer to as like relativistic speeds. It's not going faster than the speed of light, but it's going really fast. A fraction of that, going very fast. But it's just an electric device that will cause that electron to accelerate fast enough that it'll be like a beam of them. And then they can be, the device can be altered or controlled such you can have like a beam of them sweeping back and forth, maybe in a 10-inch wide or 15-inch wide path. And the box comes through and it's sweeping that device with those electrons to kill when they interact with the, a pathogen that's alive, it'll kill it because it'll strip electrons off of its structure and then it dies. So,
but I guess what I was asking is the electrons come from is it a metal, a type of heavy metal with an elemental source?
It comes from the electricity. It comes from the electricity that's used to power it.
So there is no heavy metals or any type of that or element.
There's metal that's used for the shielding, and there's metal to use to stop the electron beam if it goes through it. But no, it's not like it's uranium or something like, no.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It's like an electron that's running through the wires in your computer right now.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
And did you have another one, Millie?
I do not. That was it.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Sure. I have a couple for the board.
Sure.
You were just talking, Dawn, about how it's electricity to power them. Is it a lot of electricity that's needed to power these beams, or could go off a normal connection from the outside?
Well, it's listed as 500 kilowatts. I would defer to Steris and other folks as far as, specific amperage power requirements.
Okay, I just didn't know if they needed special power type of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that. Watts is really voltage times current. So, how many actual amperage, how many amps of current they need. I couldn't speak to that, but they could.
Okay. And you also mentioned you talked about the bunker and the shielding and it stops, and you might have just already said this, but does any of it escape outside the building? Like you talked about the inside with the bunker in the 40 hours, but does any at all escape outside the building?
In a theoretical sense, but I don't think I would be able to measure it.
So it would be And the further away you get, would it be the least amount? Like, say there's a neighborhood 300 feet away.
Oh,
Could
yeah.
you ever reach
Yeah,
that
yeah.
far?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't expect you to be able to measure it even outside the building.
Okay.
I wouldn't expect it. And that's with really sensitive instrumentation, because the design, we go back to that, their design was, the maximum was 0.41 microsieverts, okay? The normal background radiation level, like in your office, okay, right now or wherever you are, is probably in the order of maybe 5 to 15 microsieverts per hour from cosmic radiation and terrestrial radiation. You just don't have expensive, sensitive electric instruments to measure it. So if the normal Earth background radiation level where you are is 5 to 15 microsieverts per hour, that kind of puts in perspective that right up next to the bunker inside the building, the maximum design is around 41 microsieverts. So it's a little bit more than the background level, but that's inside the bunker right up next to it. And it falls off, exponentially as you get away from it, I guess is how I'd say.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Amy? I'm sorry.
You did, yes. And you mentioned the shielding is made out of concrete and metals, probably?
Yeah, Steris could speak to this exact design of the shielding better than I could, but I've seen the results of the shielding in the calculation. And
okay.
Typically to stop X-rays, concrete and metal do, the best job of that.
I just said, like, this building is 12 feet thick, walls of concrete. I didn't know if that breaks down over time or.
No.
You think it would stay? This shielding would, and they verify it. You said every year the state comes out. So if, say, the shielding was breaking down, they have tests where they verify annually.
I don't know that it's annually. It could be more often than that. It's up to the state. You could talk with them about what their program is for that. But it also, what comes with the registry is for the user to do their own monitoring and have that available. It's not like it doesn't get monitored unless the Commonwealth does it.
Okay.
So it's really both.
All right. This is a question probably more for Kathy and Fred. I'm not saying if this is approved or not approved, but if they were doing annual monitoring, who would be in charge in the town? Like, would that be submitted to the planning board, probably the fire department? I guess I might be getting ahead.
What do you, it would depend on what would be monitored, Amy. If you're talking about the radiation levels and so forth, there isn't anyone, in-house that's qualified. We can all read the report, but right. To compare it to, or, so we would have to look into that, but.
Okay, I just because he said that the applicant themselves does the testing, so I just thought to keep it, to make sure it's safe, we could also receive the reports and.
And I'm also, and again, we can ask the applicant this, or actually Mr. Flaherty, I'm assuming, which is not safe to do, but I'm assuming that the state, the Mass Department of Public Health that regulates this is probably looking for reports, monitoring reports. Is that accurate, Don? Or
I don't know what exactly. I'd have to look into that to see what exactly their monitoring requirements are for the radiation machines and what frequency they might want that or inspect for that. But back to another question. I don't think I answered it well. Once this shield is installed, this bunker is constructed, that that shielding doesn't degrade. You would actually have to disassemble the thing to make it ineffective. So, and there would be no reason to do that once it's built. So I wouldn't expect the radiation exposure rates once they're validated on initial operation to ever change. I wouldn't expect that.
What if there was like, and this is hypothetical, what if there was like an earthquake and there was like a crack in the concrete? Could that let the radiation through or the x-rays?
Yeah, theoretically, if you damage the shielding, you could have a difference in how well the shield works. So, a normal expectation of if you think anything's happened to your machine is to inspect it and to validate it's still operating properly. The same way you would expect, if the X-ray machine at the hospital or dentist office or whatever, they had an earthquake, it's like, is this thing still operating correctly? Because there's shielding there too. When you go get a chest X-ray, that room is shielded. You may not know it, you may see sheetrock, but inside that is shielding for the people going down the hallway and et cetera that aren't trying to get a chest X-ray. So, that's built into standard approach to that. But yeah, if the thing comes apart, sure. But that would have to be something quite significant to take it apart. But anything's possible, sure. But I would expect the user who's wanting to protect themselves and their workers and to check that. And that may be part of their procedures. That you'd have to look at their specific procedures for that. Certainly, if I was writing procedure for operation, that would be something I would build into the procedure as to that if there's anything to challenge the physical integrity of the shield, that you inspect it, visually, and that you take radiation survey instruments and measure it when you operate the unit again. And again, you turn the machine off, and it doesn't emit any radiation.
So just a couple of points of clarification from me. So you had mentioned, I thought when we, somewhere along the line, I had it in my head that this was the first of its kind of this kind of technology in the US, but it sounds like you're saying it's a common thing?
Well, I mean, what's your definition of common? I like MEVEX's website shows a photo of their design engineers sitting around the 100th linear accelerator they've ever produced.
Okay, I'm just confused because I think it was originally something where we were under the impression it was the first of its kind in the US. And yeah.
No. Short answer to that's no. Exactly how many are in operation to sterilize surgical equipment? I'd have to research to give you that number, but I don't see how this one's the first. A simple internet search on, particle accelerators to sterilize medical equipment will give you all kinds of things where, oh yeah, they're used, and here's the advantages of these units, and describes it and talks about the development of them over the years from the 50s when they were first invented. And like I said, they were too low a power then, so they weren't in great use. But then over time, the technology was developed to make them higher power enough to where the electron beam would have enough energy to kill the microorganisms to sterilize it. Then that would give companies that are trying to sterilize medical equipment an option. They could still use, the high-level radioactive sources with the gamma rays, which, has their drawbacks but can be used, or they can use, the gas that kills. And they can do that with it's got its advantage or disadvantages. The advantages of the particle accelerator is if you got close fitting. I'm not trying to be a salesman for them. I'm just trying to help you understand it. If you have close fitting things that are assembled, the gas may have trouble getting into a flange or a connection because it's tightly bolted together or connected or whatever. Whereas this particle beam will penetrate right through that and kill the bacteria tightly inside something that's assembled. Whereas the gas might have trouble getting there or would have to be exposed to the gas a much longer period of time to be able to permeate through that. And so that's one of the advantages of particle accelerator for this type of application.
Okay, so originally we were, go ahead, Nellie, go ahead.
I did want to clarify, if I may, is that we have been using the particle accelerators for medical, but I don't believe that there are existing X-ray radiation sterilization for medical supplies in the U.S. These machines have been used for a lot of other things like food or other things, but I don't believe they've been used for medical equipment and sterilization. But
My understanding is they have, so, but you know, you can speak to Steris and they can provide that more detail to you where they are used. I think they are.
Okay, so I think I just want to make sure you received all the materials. You've done. I appreciate all the information you provided here, but the board has actually come up with specific questions that I think the board is starting to ask now because maybe they weren't answered as part of this review. So I just want to make sure you actually received the, the things that we were looking for. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to, we're not trying to be experts in the X-ray sterilization. We want to find out what the impact is, in terms of, does this meet the performance use standards as it relates to our bylaws? Like, will there be things like EMF submitted outside or any sort of electromagnetic radiation that would disturb the neighborhood, any other neighborhood disturbing agents? So I think what we've done is come up with some questions that would kind of help inform us a little bit and also help us consider safety, so that, Amy brought up if there's something, to help us, if we were to approve this application, what, are there any conditions that we need, anything that we should be aware of or know about in advance? You've answered a lot about the state regulations, which I think is in line with what Steris has said before, that a lot of this is regulated by the state. We're not trying to be a proxy for that. I think we just want to understand, as it relates to our site plan with special permit approval application, what is the safety level? How do we, really think about the concrete? Is something going to get out? Is there any sort of disturbance to the neighborhood here? Things like that. So did you actually receive all of these questions that we had, or was it just a general review that you were able to do?
Well, perhaps I haven't. I don't know. Scott, can you help me out there? I thought I had answered the appropriate questions, but is there something that I haven't received?
Yeah, I mean, I had forwarded to him, we'd received a package through Kathy from Steris. I guess I was not aware that there were specific questions that you wanted Dawn or our team to answer. If there were specific questions, I guess I didn't realize that, or I wasn't aware of that. They may be in the packet of information that we received, but we received a lot of information. So I know I have to go back and look at exactly what we received.
Kathy, can you, I had originally asked to be a part of the kickoff meeting. I don't think I ended up being invited to it, but can you describe what was the direction on this so that we can make sure it's actually in line with what we had requested?
Or, I mean, there wasn't a kickoff meeting. I mean, once the, the group, which, included you, Carrie, once we hired them, the town signed the contract, and they began their review. And so the questions, Scott, weren't a separate document, but they were within the documents. There were two documents that were from the planning board, which were a series of questions that they asked Steris, and then Steris provided two documents back to the planning board with their responses. And so those questions are contained within the, the planning board's two packets or two documents.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess my interpretation of that was that they were questions that were directed to Steris and Steris had answered them. So I guess I wasn't aware that those specific questions were that you wanted us to answer those questions.
Yep, so I think originally, and I don't know if this was eventually communicated to you, but the plan was, I'm just looking at an email here from, I think Kathy, you had sent this, that we had finalized our additional questions at the March 10th meeting hearing with Steris. Steris was going to respond to the questions, and the questions and responses would be included in the peer review. So I think it sounds like it was received at some point. I just don't know. Maybe, obviously we had, it's been hard to reconnect after COVID a little bit. So, you know, I certainly understand that, but I think we have a slight disconnect in the question component anyway, because I don't want you to spend a night answering questions. I can tell the line of questioning is really just questions that weren't answered. So I don't want you to have to, you know, be under fire for the next hour when we ask, you know, if it's helpful for you to know that there's actually a list of these questions outlined in a little bit more organized fashion for you. So do we have, do we know exact, I mean, if this made its way or didn't make its way?
Well, Carrie.
We do have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Scott.
I mean, we do have, like I said, there are a couple of documents that were, I'm seeing a document from, I mean, these are dated documents. These are November 15th. There's a document entitled Planning Board Additional Information Request from Steris.
Yeah.
And then there's what appears to be 2 responses. Like I said, I mean, for us, we were not understanding. I mean, it seems like this project has been in front of you for some time, and you know, I guess I did not understand that you wanted us to answer these questions specifically. You know, we looked at this as there was a lot of documentation that was sent, and when I saw that they were directed towards Steris, I just figured that that's who was to answer them. I mean, typically in a peer review process, most questions are directed towards an applicant, and an applicant responds. The peer reviewer typically reviews information submitted and comments on that. I've never actually been a part of a peer review where I've had a board send me specific questions before. So that might be where part of the confusion is.
Sure, yeah, that's okay. And I think in this case, specifically to the radiation component, part of the reason why we wanted to do a peer review is as we were trying to apply, you know, a lot of it was difficult for us to interpret and understand because it's really not our area of expertise. So it's difficult for us to review the plan without really having that expertise behind it, which is sort of what started to lead us down, you know, having someone like a radiation expert come in and help us to navigate specifically through that component. You know, I think it's pretty cut and dry when you look like the review that you did, Scott, or even the traffic review. I think that's pretty cut and dry and standard in terms of looking at a site plan and reviewing the components. Although, you know, the noise piece will have to be included as well. I mean, maybe we need to level set here and just, you know, COVID could have been something that sort of got us off the tracks a little bit. I don't know if there's a opportunity to get us back on track and figure out how to.
Carrie, I'm assuming that, you know, that you're going to continue this to probably your next meeting. So if, you know, particularly with I think the majority of the questions, I'm just flipping through them now, you know, we're in the 1115 memo that the planning board sent to Steris. And on page 2 and starting on the bottom of page 2 and 3, I think that's the document you're looking at, Carrie, that those are the questions that the planning board, you know, specifically had for the peer reviewer. And then there's the town council questions in there. So you know, to me, just going through this tonight as we're talking, I mean, it seems that Dawn did answer, at least verbally, a lot, you know, many of these questions, but, you know, perhaps that's where, you know, you continue now the hearing, and maybe it has to be until the first meeting in April, but, you know, to have the peer reviewer, you know, go through those questions. Obviously, there was a misunderstanding there, but that's, you know, that's okay. I mean, we're in the middle of the hearing.
Well, one thing to note, so the thing that is always difficult is that we're not the designer of the project. So there are, nor do I think you want us to redesign the project that is there. You know, we always look at our role as commenting on information that is, you know, provided by the applicant. So some of these questions may not be, I would have to look at the questions, I guess. I mean, perhaps Kathy, you need to, maybe we could just talk about you know, exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, my understanding was that this was all part of the RFQ in general, because we spent a lot of, and Scott, this isn't directed to you, I'm just trying to level set in my own head where this was, that we took the time in March to go through and get everything on the table that we were hoping to accomplish. And then we needed to do it by that point because it was going to be part of the RFQ that everybody would receive a copy of and be able to answer if that was within their wheelhouse and able to answer. So, I mean, I just assume that these questions have always been from even the RFQ period through now as part of the process here. So if did they make it into the RFQ? So the March 10th questions and the November 15th?
Yep, they were part of the material that was mentioned in the RFQ and then provided to everybody.
Okay.
But I think to part of Scott's point is that you know, that they may have overlooked or misinterpreted this, given that, you know, peer review is typically you know, the site plan, the subdivision plans, whatever it is that the applicant has provided, you know, to the town. I mean, that's the typical peer review process. So there, you know, I think there was just some disconnect there, or some assumptions made on, you know, the town's part, Kerry, when we sent this all out.
Okay, so I guess, I mean, even if we were to boil it down, I mean, one of the biggest components, and in fact, really critical, is just meeting the performance use standards of the bylaws. And I think a lot of our questions are focused on getting to the bottom of this. And I think you did receive a copy of the bylaws. So even looking at, you know, we start to look at all these different standards about, you know, no emission of radioactive material, things like that. Just going through and reviewing the plan through the lens of what is actually on the site, or not necessarily, you know, STARS has been gracious in providing information about the process with the beams themselves, and I appreciate that. How do we take this to the next level so that we can, you know, get the information as it relates to what the board needs in the determination of the plan, so, and determination of the site plan. So the noise stuff, that's all, you know, missing at this point. All the rest of the performance standards in terms of, you know, the radioactive material, are there EMFs that are getting out? Are there, you know, anything like that? I think we may have to, I don't know how to level set right now to get us back on track to that point. I don't want to spiral this out into an ongoing process that goes too long.
Yeah, I
Any
mean,
comments from board members?
No, I guess I agree with you, Carrie. I did think that some of the questions were going to be answered. So I wasn't sure if this was the appropriate format to start asking them. Seeing that they didn't seem to be completely addressed.
Okay. Any other
So-
comments or thoughts? Okay. Scott, did you have something?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the RFP now. I guess I'm not seeing the questions, and I didn't realize there was a noise component in here. In fact, I remember when Kathy, well, maybe we need to do this. Kathy, maybe we need to speak, tomorrow and just understand exactly what questions you're looking for and what scope you're looking for. Because again, my understanding was that I was not aware that noise was part of this either.
Sure, that's fine with me, Scott. I don't know where the planning board wants to go with this, but I mean, again, we can, the questions were part of the material, that was provided. And, maybe they should have been called, well, certainly it sounds like now they should have been called out, differently or more attention brought to them, as opposed to including, maybe it should have been a separate document or something. Maybe we looked at it as a separate document, that it was the planning board's memo, both their memos that had to be reviewed. But again, I mean, I think it's all doable. It can all be, addressed.
Millie, did you have a comment, or no? I thought you said something. You look like you're on mute. Okay, so if we need to take a minute if we need to then level set on this, I'd like to be a part of that, so that we make sure that we're all on the same page, because it sounds like we spiraled a little bit, and I just want to make sure we get back to the goals that we had in mind, and we don't make it too much of a ongoing process. So I guess I need to also I'd like to take time and, make sure that we get this back on a tighter track, and that we, don't make this I don't want this to spiral out of scope. I want to make sure we stay within scope, to be fair to the applicant as well. So maybe that's something we can level set on.
Well, I mean, we can't add anything to the scope, Carrie.
No, I don't want to add anything. I actually want to make sure we're staying on scope. I want to make sure we're keeping this tight.
May I ask through the chair?
Sure.
This is Stephen. Is your question simply to have a peer review of the sets of questions that the planning board sent to Starus in 2 separate memos, which we responded to, those 2 sets of questions, that the peer reviewer would review our responses to those 2 sets? Is that it? I mean, it has to be. I agree with your sentiment. We can't lose focus. I mean, it's kind of frustrating. We've waited for the peer review. They're pretty favorable. I thought he was answering the questions. I thought the response was there is no radiation material, as we've been saying. So I don't know what's left, but I if it's those questions, that's fine. I understand that those were submitted, and
yeah, whatever's been submitted for sure. Not there's no intention to add to that. I'm just
okay.
I feel like we've spiraled a little bit, and maybe COVID's a part of that.
Well, if I may, I was going to say that, I was one that was objecting to the peer review on inside the building pursuant to a site plan review. I thought this was very helpful. It was very educational. It was very interesting, in terms of the technology. So I appreciated the presentation. But if the scope is those questions, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Those questions and our responses.
Correct.
Right, but I mean, particularly, I mean, I don't think this is difficult to continue this. I mean, the list of questions, you know, and maybe Scott, this is where, you know, you and I can go through the questions tomorrow, but I mean, the list of questions from the planning board, specifically for the peer review part of the application, are in the memo, particularly the November 2019 memo. So, I mean, I think, Carrie, if the board just, you know, directs the consultant, the peer reviewer to look, you know, to look to those questions and answer those questions as an addendum to their letters. Am I missing something, or?
That may be right. I just I just want to go back and make sure, absolute sure that that's the right track, so that we don't take any. I mean, I think that would make sense. Does the board have any comments on that, or?
I just remember the process was we went through all these questions. The applicant was allowed to answer them, and then the peer review was going to go through them. I mean, that's what I thought the process was.
Well, you had specific questions for the peer reviewer.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Okay. But anything that's on the table is just from a memo. It's not new stuff. It's just either March 10th that we all looked at together, or I guess November, the original.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah did answer the questions. I'm having trouble though finding the second response, but I'm sure I have it. It's just not in my pile.
If it's helpful, I mean, certainly, you know, Carrie, we can talk tomorrow, or Thursday, to go over the two sets of planning board questions.
Yeah, why don't we make sure we both think the same thing? And I understand that we had that meeting in March, and I think the world shut down. So I get it that the probably, who knows, things slip through or go through, or whatever the case. So I just want to make sure we get back to the place that we left off. I feel like we're slightly off skew from that spot. So maybe it makes sense, yeah, if we just reconnect on that and then give a little better guidance to the peer reviewer, just to make sure they're looking in the right spot. And so the information that we have is not that this is great. This is very helpful, and I thank you for it. I just want to make sure, so that you're not peppered for the rest of the night with questions on the spot, that you have a more fair chance to look at them and look at the responses that were already given and all of that.
So Scott, I don't know if it, and again, we can do more of this offline, but between, maybe it makes sense that I don't have my schedule for the rest of the week in front of me, but certainly maybe by the end of the week, Carrie is the chair, myself, Dawn and Scott, we can, just do a Zoom.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, does that make sense, Carrie?
Yep. And in terms of providing direction, is that something that has to be part of a public hearing, or is that, or just part of the?
Well, I mean, nothing can be, given that.
It's not already in the place.
Right. This went out to bid and so forth. I mean, it's really just sort of, circling back here and reviewing the questions with Scott and Dawn. And I think, then they take it from there and provide, the response back to the planning board.
Okay. Let me also give the applicant any chance to comment or ask questions or anything.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we appreciate the peer reviews reports. They were thorough. A little disappointed about, I don't want to say we're going backwards on the technology, but as long as it's, as the town planner mentioned, it's what's within the scope of the RFP, that seems appropriate. But in the meantime, I think we can start providing our responses or supplemental information to address the traffic and the site plan issues in those letters. So you can have those for a subsequent meeting, and then get the peer review's response to the Q&A that we engaged in twice.
Okay.
And we can start to narrow the issues because this has been a very long road, as you know.
Yes. Traffic, and what was the other thing that you mentioned to, oh, the site plan. Yeah.
Site plan memo. You know, for instance, I mean, I don't know what you think about the granite curbing requirement. Or comment, you know, things like that. We'll respond to those.
Mhm. Okay.
For the chair, I just had a quick question. As far as traffic, I think she asked for more information. Is that what you mean? You're going to get her the information she was looking for?
If I may, through the chair, we already reached out to VAI, and I think they've already have a draft memo providing the supplemental information. So we're already, you know, our interest is to close out the issues identified. So yes.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So that sounds like it'll move ahead. And then, Stephen, it sounded like you were going to regroup a little bit on the tech environmental of Waltham, whatever their status was.
I'm sorry. Oh, on acoustics?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And yep. And the other question I think was just the lighting, any details of the lights, but there was already a photometric plan submitted.
Yeah, the light details, light fixture details should not be a problem.
Great. Perfect. Okay. So why don't we, any other comments or questions?
No.
Okay. So why don't we, when would be, or when should we continue to push ahead on the, well, I don't know, in terms of the traffic or the other information? Should we plan to come back in April or? If we're able to solve the Q&A component this week, then I assume that after that, the peer review team could do what they need to do. There's no need for us to meet again and resolve, agree that we're going to move ahead. We're just resolving that. They're going to do their thing. And then so they could be working in the next month. So that when we come back, we've got a complete package.
Right.
I agree with that, Carrie. I mean, I have no idea what their schedule is, and Scott can speak to that, but I mean, that makes sense to me. And that's
Scott, does that make sense to you too?
I mean, that's why I was thinking originally the April 6th meeting.
Yeah.
Unless the consultants think they can, well, that's a quick turnaround though.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. I hate to just drag us back here to not be able to resolve this.
Yeah.
So why don't, is April 6th an option for everybody?
Well, we think we might have our information for the 16th, but I don't know if you put it on the agenda for the 16th, if people aren't ready, we could just continue it to April. But I don't want to, I don't know how the peer review feels about, I mean, I don't know if they've seen the Q&A copies to know if they could have that in time for the 16th of March.
I think we need to look at the questions specifically and see how much work it's going to take to answer those. It might not be a lot. It might be more than we think. So I just need to look at those. I think if you continue to the 16th or April, we'll do our best to meet those schedules.
Yeah. Yeah, on the 16th, you would be after a pretty significant hearing that may push you to the end anyway, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
You may want to
Okay.
not spend your night that way. So,
That's
but as
fine.
long as we can try to make a good faith effort to keep moving forward through the next hearing, I think we should be in a good spot if we target the 6th. Our first meeting in April is the 6th, Kathy. Obviously, it's the first Tuesday. Yep.
Yep.
I'm told that's fine too, if I may, to the chair.
Yep. Okay. So it would be the 6th at, I think, does 6 o'clock work for everybody as a time to get started?
Works for me.
Good. Okay. Okay. So why don't we have a motion to continue to April 6th at 6 p.m.?
I make a motion to continue the public hearing for 425 Whitney Street to April 6th, 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? I'm actually realizing that I didn't open up for public comments. So what, I'm sorry?
We didn't vote to close, so can you open it up?
Why don't we, all right, why don't, so there's motion's already been made and seconded, so there's a motion on the floor. So if you're interested in public comments, well, I don't want to not vote to continue, but eventually we will come back to this motion after. I would like to take public comments. So why don't we, Kathy, if we vote not to continue, can we then vote after public comments to continue? Even, can we
Yes, yeah, it's a little blip. You can just do, public comments now. And then whenever you want to finish public comments, then vote to continue.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody. Are there any public comments? This is a public hearing and the public is welcome to comment at this time. I see one hand in the audience. I'm gonna allow you to talk. Whoops, did I do the right one? It just moved up here.
Hello.
Okay. Oh, John Wickstead, there you are. I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in. Yes. You are.
Hi, this is John Wickstead from 2 Stirrup Brook Lane.
Hello.
I have a couple comments. Number one, on the Steris facility, presumably, I just had a question. This is mostly hospital instruments that they're sterilizing. Is that correct?
So I think I can actually answer that, but Stars, you feel free. It could be anything. It sounds like in the past we've been given examples of food or even like dog foods comes to mind for some reason. I don't know why. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so. I think it's medical supplies and consumables, which like Band-Aids, gauze.
Oh, okay.
I don't think there's food. There's no
I don't
food.
know why I thought that. I'm glad you clarified.
That was the question previously. Our answer is no food.
Got it. Okay.
So these are goods that they're sterilizing and not instruments? That's correct?
Goods and not instruments, is it?
Through the chair. I mean, it's all new products. I don't know the definition of instruments, but like tongue depressors from a manufacturer.
I understand. It's not active. No, I understand.
Not used medical equipment. No.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. My comments largely, as you guys would expect, revolve around the 0 Bartlett Street proposal. And I would make 3 comments on this. We have heard from Mr. Donahue and the Gutierrez Company on multiple occasions, and yet we still have no clarification as to what their subdivision plan is actually about. And they have yet to clarify for us whether this is about the street or whether they're also trying to slide in, double density development in this already stressed area. And, this is intentional on their part. And I find it, really discouraging that despite multiple questions from the public and from board members about what they're actually trying to achieve with their subdivision, they refuse to answer that. I would say also, number 2, we have never resolved to anyone's satisfaction the environmental issues that continue to exist on this land.
Carrie, are we talking about Steris or are we talking about Bartlett Street?
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
John,
I thought this was the first public comment that we had. I'm sorry. I thought
that's
that
okay. That's no problem. So we're just within the Stars hearing, but just because I know you look like you waited for a long time to ask, I'm just going to give you the courtesy of finishing your point, and then if anyone has questions about Stars, we'll just focus on that after.
Oh, that's okay. You guys are doing good work on behalf of the town, and if it's about Stars, it's about Stars. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Okay, any other comments related to Stars? Okay. Okay, great. Then what I'm going to do is, let's see. Why don't we go back then? It doesn't, Scott, that's just your hand up. Okay. Did you have something to say, Scott? Your hand is just up.
I'd raised it before, so I think it's just lingering.
Okay, no problem. I just want to make sure that you aren't stuck there. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is, we have a motion on the table to continue the hearing to April 6th at 6 p.m. So if that motion has been made, seconded, and there's no further discussion, I will take a roll call vote. Let's see, Millie,
Yes, aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. So we will see you on April 6th at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. We'll start to provide our answers to the peer review letters. And before we end, I just want to say I'm glad to see the town engineer and town planner back at their posts. I think they weren't at the prior meeting, so I'm glad they're both back at it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda. Well, I think what we have to do is come to a decision. Do we want to, we have available to us the 9th to look at bylaws, but do we want to start to finish as much as we can now? I mean, Kathy, does that make sense based on the warrant needing to be approved on the 8th?
To do the zoning now, is that?
Should we get as far as we can, or?
What, yeah, I was thinking we could do it one of two ways, Carrie, with the, I mean, if that does the board, well, does the board want to go through, you know, every one of the articles, or, you know, are there certain articles that, that I'm anticipating that people are all set with, and, you know, you can just, you know, go check tonight. And then what or what I specifically wanted to get direction on was the non-conforming information that town council sent out. And as far as specifically what language do you want to add? I mean, that spot has been reserved for the non-conforming change, the changes that you, excuse me, there's a specific article that's a spot that's been reserved for whatever it is that you want to do with that non-conforming language. And then the second thing that I want to talk to you about tonight is the craft, you know, brew and winery and distillery, which is a little bit more complicated than I think everyone might have assumed. So I have some questions and comments on that. So, you know, if you want to, what time is it? 9 o'clock. If you want to kind of maybe just, you know, the warrant closes on the 8th on Monday night. The town administrator is aware that, you know, that you're talking about articles tonight and that it might carry over into another meeting, but, you know, nothing definitive on that. So personally, I'd like to get to non-conforming and craft brewery, and get those out of the way, and then go back to the rest of the articles. But I don't think there's a lot on the rest of the articles, Carrie, unless
there's not a lot. Is that what you said?
I don't think there's any, unless, yeah.
So I think that I just want to make sure that, so before we had actually finalized almost, I think I sent a batch over of the ones that we did, like a quick straw poll. And we had, I had sent over to you the ones that the board kind of said, okay, we're good with these. Now we just have these left. So the ones that we have left, is it only craft brewery and non-conforming?
Well, no, those are ones that I had not written, but you had, if I remember correctly, you had asked me a question about the prohibited uses that you are looking to add, and why hazardous waste wasn't listed on there. And I think it was Amy, you had said, you know, was it because we have a hazardous waste bylaw? And that was my reason for leaving it off, because if, you know, you've got a bylaw that's now not so much encouraging a hazard waste facility, but you have a bylaw now that is providing for if someone that was a hazardous waste facility, you know, where they can locate in town. So then to say in another section of your bylaw that it's not allowed, you know, obviously that contradicts it.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's why I didn't include it in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my recollection was that the number, I mean, the lettering is a little bit different from the Medway bylaw that Amy had used. So my recollection is that you had discussed at one of the meetings, or at least how I have it in my notes, is that you were sort of cutting it off. That's not the right word, or terminology, but that you were, you know, the list was longer for Medway, but that you were stopping at the yard for storage and sale of used building and junk materials.
Yep. Okay. So that sounds about, oh, go ahead, Amy. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. We had talked about it, but it might have been when Kathy and Fred were out. Self-storage was one of the items that was eliminated from the bylaws, and I actually found the minutes from it. I think it was taken out in 2009. But we still have a definition for it, but it's not in the use table, which makes it, if not permitted, then prohibited. But I wondered, to make it simpler, do we just add self-storage facilities to this list?
Let me just find it, Amy. So we have.
It wasn't on the list. It might have been on one of the other lists, but it wasn't on the list. But
Well, I'm just looking what we have in the existing bylaw is we have commercial storage facility.
yeah,
And we have a definition for that.
yeah.
So is that what you're suggesting, Amy, to add? Because we don't have.
No, that wasn't it. The self-storage, I just have to find it fast. I wasn't ready.
Well, self-storage, if I remember correctly, self-storage is not allowed
Right.
in
Yeah.
Northborough.
Right. So I was wondering if we added self-storage at the bottom of this list, just because it makes it, you know, this list was an easy list for someone to look up. If you go to page 737, it lists self-storage in the definition, but then there's no place for it in the table, use table. So I do remember I went back and I read the 2009 bylaws and self-storage was taken out, but I'm wondering if we just add it to this list just to make it just an easy list to look at, you know?
So Amy, I'm sorry. So are you saying that the definition that's on top of page 37, that was removed, but somehow we've kept it in the bylaw?
Yeah, like that definition is still there, self-storage facility, but it's not in the use table. And we had discussed it before that they're not allowed. So I'm not saying to add it to the use table, but I was thinking maybe we add it to this list. It doesn't, I don't know if it hurts to have the definition in there. Like,
Well, if you're gonna, this is my opinion, if you're gonna add it to the list of prohibited uses, not a bad idea to leave that definition in there.
right. Yeah, and that's fine. I just thought, so there's no questions, we would just add it to this list at the bottom, the self-storage facilities.
I don't have a problem with that. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay. All right, and then other than that, there was just a minor little extra G in there that we took out.
Okay, so there's an agreement from the board to add in as letter N, add in self-storage facility as a prohibited use.
Yeah, is that okay with anybody that does not like that idea?
And then what do I have? What are you saying, Carrie? I have a extra G?
Yes, Millie just found this. Is this what you're looking at, Kathy? The same document? It was just within. We just crossed out the G.
Oh, I did not catch that. Thank you.
I think Millie caught that with her eagle eyes.
Okay, so that's okay with everyone?
Yep, so these are the ones we already went through. I think you may have not been at this meeting, so it's actually helpful to just go through them. So we went through this and that's what we found for that one. Then we went through this is the contractor's yard. So Amy sent you the updated definition that we agreed to at the last board meeting for this one.
Yeah, and then the material that I sent around, I mean, that I sent to everyone is corrected.
Yep.
Okay. Then we looked at the use table. So we didn't have anything here. We said this looked good.
Yeah.
Accessory.
Wholesale trade. Oh, okay. I just have them in a different order. That's okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, but this is, that was accessory. Yep. And then we have commercial storage facility. This one was okay.
Yeah. And then what you don't have and what you're scrolling through, Carrie, is because that's the older version. We added, you told me, you instructed me to add in the wholesale trade. So that's now in as its own separate article. Right now, wholesale trade is allowed as a special permit from the zoning board in the business west and the business south. And you, I guess you all agreed that to change that to a prohibited use in business west and business south. And then in the highway business and industrial, right now, wholesale trade is allowed by right. And in highway business, you wanted to change it to zoning board. And then in industrial, you wanted to change it to planning board.
Okay. So then
Amy had sent that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hold on, let me share the right one. I'm sorry, I realized that maybe I wasn't sharing the right one. Can everybody see this now? And it says wholesale trade? Yep. So this looks like what you're looking at too, Kathy?
Right, yes. So that's what Amy had sent me as part, you had sent me those changes, Carrie, and then Amy added this and I think the contractor yard correction, Amy.
Yep.
Okay. So does this one look good? So this one we're actually looking at, does this look good to everybody? This one here? Any comments on this one?
Commercial storage, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I passed wholesale trade. And now I'm in wholesale trade. Wholesale trade look good?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, groundwater with the 2-family dwelling unit. This one I think we thought looked okay.
Yeah.
This is the one, groundwater. This is how we ended at our last planning board meeting. So I did attend the groundwater here, the groundwater meeting. Amy's obviously a groundwater committee member, just to hear some feedback there. And I think the final note from Jason, the chair, was that members would be, if they had feedback, that they would provide it separately. Amy, is that what you understood to be the final note on that? Or Freddie?
Yeah, he said to attend the public hearing.
So if they had any further, there was no definitive answer, but that Jason had told members if there would be a public hearing, and if they had any feedback, they could certainly come and provide that.
And then Carrie, if you want to go back to the very first, hopefully it's on page 1. This is an article that This one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
This is an article that it's a zoning article, so you know, are responsible for, you know, it'll be part of the public hearing notice. But this is an article that the building inspector and town council had been working on. And it has to do with, I mean, we have an existing bylaw about labeled as non-criminal disposition. But there was something about the way that it was written, and I guess it needed to be updated or revised or whatever on the advice of town council, so that the building inspectors, you know, could issue the tickets and violations, and that it's I guess it's up to $300 per day per event or something like that. But that's where that came from.
I just have a quick question. So the way it was written currently, he wasn't able to, so it had to change. Is that what
I can get more info from Bob, Amy,
Yeah.
you know, for your next meeting or you know, for when we start the public hearing. But yeah, I think somehow the way that it was written, that people were able to go to court and very easily get their ticket overturned, and it had something to do with the way the language was.
Okay.
So I haven't been involved in this. I know it has, you know, I was given it from town council to put in the packet because it has to, you know, it's a zoning article. So,
okay.
So there you go.
I mean, are we all okay with this, or do you have additional questions, Amy, before thinking you're okay with this?
No, that was just my question for Bob, if he needed it to add, because I know it was 300 a day, and now it's going to 50, 100, then 300, which is fine. A lot of towns do that, but I just wanted to know the background behind it.
Yeah, I wasn't a part of this. It was town council and the building inspector. So I'll get more detail from Bob, but.
Okay, is there a spot for this saved anyway?
Yes, it's on the warrant. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments from board members on this one?
No.
Nope.
So the other two that I have, well, one you have, I had sent you information that it's not in, it was separate. I had sent you information from town council, and then where he was looking for a little bit more direction too on what it was that you know, I sent him, Amy, all that information that you had sent him. But it was a little confusing to follow. So the gist of what we both got out of it was, and I think we had talked about this at one of the planning board meetings or several of them, was that the direction you wanted to go in was to get more of these, you know, non-conforming to the zoning board of appeals. And so the town council reviewed the information that Amy had provided, and then suggested that what probably, based on his experience, what makes the most sense is that the language from the Southborough bylaw be used. He believes that how Southborough very succinctly describes it, he believes that takes care of your concerns as they were presented to him in Amy's information. And then today, and I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at it, but I had just sent you all the section out of the Southborough bylaw that talks about non-conforming uses and structures. And so I can, if people hadn't had a chance to look at that, if you want me just to read you what, you know, Southborough has, or if you know, I don't know how you want to handle that tonight.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to pull it up so we're all looking at it. Does this look like it's it? The Southborough?
Yeah, that's what I had sent. Yeah.
Okay. So is there a particular component of this he was looking at, the exemptions?
Yeah, so you look at the exemption section, and let me just find my town council.
To me, it was kind of confusing. I didn't figure out what we were doing.
Well, that's our point exactly, Amy, is that Dave Janeski and I couldn't really figure out, based on the information that you had provided to him, what it is that you want to do, other than my notes that talk about wanting to make it more restrictive or strict, more strict. And
See, I didn't have a lot of time to look at it because I thought we had Bartlett and West Street and Steris tonight. So I was focusing on those. I didn't have time to look at the non-conforming, and then it did come in later. I started looking at it later today when we got the other information, and I didn't look at it long enough to have a good feel for if it's really solving. Like, I hate to make a rash decision tonight. Like, it is such a big bylaw. I don't want to make a quick decision and then look at it again in a month and say, well, that's not really fixing anything, or that did the opposite, or even when I looked, I wasn't sure.
Time to look at it either.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on what part, so is he proposing this from the red portion down?
right, so his whole, what I provided you of what Dave wrote was, again, because it wasn't clear to either one of us where the board wanted to go with this, he was hesitant to write a bylaw because he hasn't been part of your discussions, and I relayed to him what, again, I didn't have a lot of information to go on. And Amy, I know you provided a lot of pages, but it was,
right.
So it was just, it was not easy to write a bylaw. So therefore we couldn't write a bylaw. So what Dave did is he is making suggestions that the board might want to consider. So you can, right now, the bylaw reads, similar. Let me just get the present bylaw reads that is similar or less detrimental. Well, right there, A. I mean, that's what you've got. So similar or less detrimental use. That's the big, that's the sort of like the money numbers right there. So he's suggesting that you could either change it to what he's written right here, that's on the bottom of page 2, or, scrolling further, that's another option.
Oh, sorry, I was reading. Here we go. Or this option 2.
Right. And this option 2 is, I am pretty sure this is the one that's right out of Southborough, but no, it's slightly different than the Southborough one. So that's, those are, if we interpreted what you wanted correctly, these are 2 options. A third option is what the Southborough bylaw says, as an example. And, I have a spot reserved on the warrant. And I just need direction as to what it is that you are specifically after here.
Was there any way, I know you're saying Monday they're meeting?
They're closing the warrant on Monday.
We had talked about maybe having we got an email maybe meeting, but it's Tuesday on the 9th. I was just wondering if we could just meet for an hour someday just to discuss it, because I hate to do it on the fly without having time to read the three of them. It's a lot to process.
That is, Carrie and I had originally talked about, trying to find another meeting date prior to the 8th, and it just, it wasn't possible just between our two schedules. So we came up with the closest that we could get was the 9th. And so I do have a webinar license reserved for you at 6 o'clock if you did want to meet on the 9th. But that's entirely up to the board. And I don't, I won't know till tomorrow if they can close the warrant without any language from you. So it might be that we need, that I need to supply say this option right now that Carrie's got up. I could put that into I could provide that to the town administrator for them to put on the warrant on the 8th, but they already know, I spoke to them today, to the office today. They already know that there's a possibility that you might be meeting on the 9th to clarify your language on one or two articles, this being one of them.
Does that mean we'd have to amend it on town meeting floor, or they amend it before?
No, you would be doing it on it's not going to get printed on Monday. It just closes on Monday. So anyone looking at that warrant, the warrant for the selectmen's meeting needs to know what, each article is, that there's basic language there. So I would have to provide some basic language if you want to include this for the 2021 town meeting. But they are aware that you may be meeting on Tuesday to fix the language for this.
So, all right, it looks like our choice, this is the original. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. The original is here. This is what we have now.
Correct.
Okay.
No.
This is his option A he's proposing.
Yes, that's one. Well, it's not that it's option A. It's just, it's the section A.
Oh, yes. But I mean, his
That's one option.
One
Yep.
option. And this is a second option.
Correct.
Okay. And the third option is to
Southborough
be very
bylaw.
similar to Southborough. Okay. At first glance, this one looks more confusing to me to read. I don't know if anyone else has that thought or not, or if Amy, this is something that you think is actually needed to specify. I know you want time to look at it, but just as a general gut reaction, is there a direction that you at first glance have any thoughts on?
Actually confused me because I didn't know it was part A. There were two choices, so I wasn't sure what that was, but that was more confusing to me. But another thing I wanted to add to the bylaw, and I had it on the original, was the purpose and intent of the bylaw at the top of the page. It's probably not on here, but my original sheet listed the purpose and the intent. There's the Southborough one, you just passed it.
Oh.
It has something about 50%. And I like Southborough, but I was taking out the 50% and I added something different. I actually have something that I could pull up and share, but
Sure, I'll stop sharing.
we'll see if I can find it. I was trying to just want to say, I was trying to go through it fast today. Of course, now I'm on the spot. I'm not gonna find it.
Well, you're looking. Is it just this one and craft breweries, Kathy, that's our outstanding?
Yes, that I have, yes. And those, and they both again have a reserved spot. Do you want me to jump into craft brewery? That might be a quicker conversation.
Yep.
Okay, craft, it's a little more complicated than, it's fun to be looking at all of these bylaws, but there are many angles that the town could take. And I don't feel that the board has had an adequate discussion because you haven't had enough information. You were given a couple examples that, Amy, pulled from other towns. And that's absolutely, one of the ways you can start looking at how do you want to write a bylaw. But several of the towns that I have communicated with and reviewed their bylaws are, specifically are looking at it as a use that they want in their downtown. They're trying to add it as a something in the village, something that's walkable. People. Not that you can walk around with an open container in Massachusetts, but just something to do in the downtown. So to add a craft brewery, distillery, winery. Some towns have just focused on a brewery. And then when you talk about it in a smaller area, such as a downtown or your commercial strips, because they do tend to generally be strips, there are certain gallons of beer, wine, and spirits that kick off, whether it's, well, actually, I don't know that it's part of the state law, but towns have different gallons of what would be allowed in a downtown, and that limits. It's kind of like years ago. It was very common when a lot of towns didn't want chains. Whether it was chain drugstores, chain restaurants. So there's a magic number that all these chains look for. So a lot of towns, including Northborough, we passed or adopted a bylaw that prohibited, over a certain square footage, and that knocks out chains. So that's a way to prohibit chains in your town. So there's ways to do, how many gallons of beer that they can create, that they can make. And then there's towns that did a combo of, something in their downtown, and then actual manufacturing, in the industrial section. And that's a whole different set of how many gallons of these liquids. And then some towns just focused on, don't want it in our downtown. We're not looking for, we don't want it necessarily to compete with the existing restaurants, taverns, whatever. So we just want to, promote the manufacturing of it, where it's actually brewed and bottled, and, then they distribute it to, to stores to sell. So I feel like that there's a lot of information that I've learned that we have not been able to talk about as a town. And then there's also a couple of, well, more than a couple of towns, but that adopted something, one of these bylaws back in like 2014, 15, 16, and they haven't had a single applicant. So that tells me a couple of different things. That tells me that there might be something that again, there's a magic number that's not in their bylaw, so that it doesn't really make it attractive to someone. Or it just might be that, the market in that particular town, isn't ready for this type of use. But, to me, that needs to be looked at when I'm crafting a bylaw. So my suggestion is that, given to me that there's again, it's not complicated. It's just, I think the board needs to have some more discussion on this, that, you wait until next year to do this. I don't think you're going to lose out on a lot, but I mean, we've never had anyone approach us. That doesn't mean that, somebody's not going to approach us in a month, but that's where I'm at with the craft brewery. You can also turn around and tell me, hey, just take one of the ones that Amy, provided to us and put that in our bylaw. So that's an option also.
Okay, so thoughts on that from the board?
My first thought is that we need more time to discuss it. That's my first thought.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking that, or we just put the one in industrial and then next year we bring forward the one for downtown. But maybe just putting it in industrial, I don't know if that's hard too.
Well, what do you want to put in industrial? So I don't have any language other than what you provided me, Amy, because
Okay. I could have done it, but I didn't, so.
Well, I mean, anyone can just copy a bylaw from another town, but I just don't think that that's, I just don't think that's fair to Northborough. I think you want to talk about what it is that you want to do. Do you want to do both? Do you want to only do one? So that's.
The one that we had talked about, the ZBA, We
You're focusing on, what was that, just the craft brewery one?
No, it was focusing on, no, you asked for, or you talked about, beer, wine, distillery, having it as a special permit, I believe, in the industrial district. And you wanted both, like a, tavern type, pour, so they can have a pouring license. And you wanted manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, when I started to look into it, a few weeks ago, it's a little more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
So my recommendation is that we should wait, because I just think even with industrial, there's just so much information, and I'd rather do it right the first time, instead of going back and changing them year after year.
Okay. So Millie, your inclination was to hold. Michelle, your inclination is to hold. Amy, do you have a?
Yeah, no, I don't mind holding too.
Okay, Anthony?
I'm split. I mean, if there was something that was even on the industrial side that was half baked, if we could take advantage of something over the next year and then have time to revamp it for next year, but it sounds like the sentiment of the board is to hold off at this point.
I mean, is there a baseline, Kathy, that just would allow us to, I guess we don't want to risk anything. Maybe it doesn't make sense that there's a baseline that allows it in industrial, the bottom, the simplest of definition of all, first, the simplest allowance of it. I don't know.
Well, part of the reason, part of the questions that I have about this is that, there's just, there's just a lot of concern in town right now about traffic. So, when we go to, maybe Treehouse in Charlton is an extreme, but I don't have answers about, the volume of traffic that Treehouse has created, and the state having to get involved with, changing traffic patterns on Route 20. And, that's a lot of data that probably you should have before we propose a bylaw like this, because I think at your public hearing, there's going to be a lot of questions from people. That, great, you want to put this in the industrial district, and, it sounds a lot more fun than a warehouse, but, what's the traffic impact to my neighborhood? I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not significant, but I don't know. So I'm just saying, going into this, again, there's, towns have had, various towns have various definitions. So I don't think it's going to be a heavy lift, doing it for next year. It's not like the solar bylaw or the hazardous waste bylaw that's pages and pages. I mean, there's, beer is beer, wine is wine, but I think it's a matter of deciding what it is, that you want. Do you want it in the downtown? And again, what kind of impact are we looking at? I just think there's
No, it's a fair point.
It would be great if we had a fall special town meeting. I know what the answer to that is, but we could do the non-conforming and the breweries. And I actually was thinking, and I had it written down before the consultant said it, how we can add dark skies into our bylaw too, because for every applicant now, we're always saying dark skies, dark skies. We might as well just add it into the bylaw, so then it's there.
Yeah, let's wait a couple months for that discussion. Let's finish 2021.
All right, so it sounds like overall it may make sense to wait so we can get that information. As part of our public hearing, assuming we get a lot of participation, I wonder if it's worth reserving time at the end to just float by a couple of things we've been thinking about. Like we had talked about craft brewery, but we didn't put through for this year. Any thoughts from the public on next year? Or I don't know, maybe it's a waste of time, but you know, where's that spot to ask people, you know?
Sure.
Might
I
be
mean,
helpful.
I can count on one hand how many people we've had at these public hearings.
I know they're not super popular, so maybe it'll just be us talking about it.
That said, you know, whoever's there is captive, and you know, you might, yeah, you know, start the conversation. But all right, so it sounds like, just to end this craft brewery, we're going to do it for next year, right? Is that?
I think that sounds to be the consensus.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, so then what do you want to do back on the non-conforming? Like I said, this is what I propose. This is what I think you can do. Not that I want to add another meeting for all of us, but we meet next Tuesday. For you know, tomorrow's purposes, or it's usually Wednesday that we have to get the information to the town administrator for the selectmen's packages. So you know, pick one of these proposals, so that there is, because I have to give them language to go along with my reserve spot. So I put that language in there, and then they know full well that you are meeting on Tuesday, and you come up with language on Tuesday.
Okay, Amy, did you find that document you were looking for?
Yep, I did. Now I'm gonna find it. You know what's weird? When I go to share screen, I say a million other things. I thought I closed all my windows except for that one. Is that it? No.
I mean, but even if Amy pulls up language at 9:30,
right?
Are you all gonna?
So, you know, if I could just say something, even if Amy thinks it should be this way, and then the attorney thinks it should be this way, and then staff suggests this way, then you have 3 different opinions and you're running up against a timeline. I mean, it's just, I've been on this board for so many years. I just feel like, you know, that this is not the right way to do it when you're on a tight timeline. I just feel like I wouldn't vote on something tonight. I'd have to see all 3.
No, I think we're coming back, Michelle, on so Tuesday we're gonna,
Okay.
we have a quick meeting. This is just to put language in as place, that's my understanding. Am I understanding right? If this is placeholder text that Kathy needs?
Yeah, that has to be, provided to the town administrator and the selectmen this week. I mean, I need this tonight.
Okay, but this isn't final. This is just placeholder. And then on Tuesday, we actually.
You have to finalize.
We
Yeah.
final. So does that make it a situation a little different from what you've understood, Michelle, or you don't like that either?
No. I mean, so we have legal counsel, what they're recommending. Amy's going to suggest what she's going to recommend. And then I'm assuming Kathy or Fred, are you agreeing with town council, or is there anyone else have any other recommendations?
No, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with anything. I'm looking for direction from you.
We're just looking for placeholder text in the interim.
What I actually did was take Southborough's, because Kathy sent that today, but I was going to ask the board, like, what's underlined I thought was different in Southborough. It talks about the cost not exceeding 50% of the assessed value. I'd never heard of such a thing. So I was actually taking Southborough, making it smaller. I was thinking of taking out that part. But in the classes I've gone to, they said to define what substantial is. So I was taking out all the 50%. And then I was gonna say we should just define what substantial was. And I copied what another,
Amy,
but-
I'm looking at Southborough's right now. Where did you find the 50% language?
it was on the, it was like the first thing that, Carrie, it was on the top of that page. And that's what I thought when you sent it out.
I have not, I don't see that on what I have from Southborough's website. This is as of Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. In their zoning chapter 174-18.
I found this today with the email that you had sent out. And there were 2 sections, but I do think it's too late.
Oh, Amy, that's all about restoration. That's not about I mean, it's in the non-conforming section, but that's all about restoration of a building.
But doesn't it say non-conforming uses, lots and structures? I copied.
I mean, that's the section title, non-conforming uses and structures. But then you get down into when someone wants to restore a building, like people will leave up, the old trick was you take down the entire building and leave up one wall, supported by a 2x4, and you say, oh, but I'm restoring this. So it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. So I get to use the old setbacks and I can keep it on this small lot. That's what restoration is all about.
Yeah, but this one I got word for word from them.
Isn't what you are all after is about not restoration, but it's about a non-conforming use or structure, which now leads me to believe that this is not doable. If now we're going into a restoration situation.
No, I'm not. And I didn't take this out of restoration because it says non-conforming uses, lots and structures, but
yeah, that's the title of the. Well, again, like I said, I'm looking at their bylaw that I copied today, and restoration talks about, the assessed valuation, 75% of the assessed valuation, and
this is different. This is 50%.
So weird.
Yeah. That's why I think it's too late, because when I got this stuff today, and then we had all these applications, it was too late to go through A, B, and C, and I didn't even know there were A, B, and C. I think unfortunately, we started talking about this in late December, but things.
So Kathy, for the placeholder text, it doesn't have to be the same length. It literally just has to be placeholder, or does it have to be like a similar length that we'd want?
No, length doesn't matter.
Okay. So if we just need placeholder text, what's our best bet for that? And then we can go through the rest of this. Amy, I know you wanted more time to sort through it. So is there a good placeholder text option for us then?
Can you pull the other one back up or?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
But my original paperwork too had a purpose and intent at the very top of the chapter. And a lot of bylaws have that. And so I wanted to add the purpose and intent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's this one, and then Southborough.
Where's Southborough? It's not there, is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, is it up top? I'm sorry. Oh, here's the 50% right here.
Right, I copied it from there.
What is this?
I'm just not understanding what I took out of there.
I know, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe it's another section that I did not copy to send you.
Yeah, at the non-conforming, it links to like 3 different sections.
Huh.
When you link on the criteria, it goes back to a criteria section that has criteria.
I've got sections 18 and 19. And this looks like it's section 9E. So there it is. But
That's when I was,
I didn't send out 9E.
Well, do we want to put this as placeholder? Or no?
I was thinking that, but I didn't want to put all the 50% of the assessed value. Like, that's what I want to talk about with the board. That seems very detailed. Like, I actually just wanted had a definition for substantially more detrimental. Like, a lot of towns add a little footnote at the bottom what substantially stands for, because it's so subjective. They said to have a little paragraph or criteria for substantial.
Well, I
Okay.
think if we just use one of those as a placeholder and then can really look over it, because I haven't looked over it at all.
Yeah.
So it's not
I'm
a
just
final decision.
I was just wondering if we use that 50% one, if the selectmen will see it and be like, well, that seems a little crazy, 50% of the assessed value. It seems complicated, but I like the top part of it.
But I think they know it's subject to change. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
They'll know that.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna put this one in because it's going in the direction of where we'll likely go minus the percentage.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the question about it is, wasn't this what the attorney recommended with the percentage? Or no?
He recommended 3 different things.
Okay. Yeah, I'd want to figure out why we wouldn't want to keep it in or take it out. And what are the reasons behind it?
Okay. Are you okay with us using this as placeholder for right now?
Yep, I am.
Okay.
All right, so you want me to, Amy, you want me to add in a purpose and intent, and you had sent that?
Yeah, I had sent it. I can resend it.
Okay.
It was just a very basic one.
What town did you take it from?
I don't even remember off the top of my head. Probably Framingham or Medway.
Do you have friends that live there?
No, they just redid their.
Those are
They
the
did.
two towns you go to. So, all right, so the direction here is to add the language, use the language that Dave Dineski suggested from Southborough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
All
then
right, I've got one more, I'm sorry, I've got one more thing I meant to ask you all. In the contractor's yard definition, Amy, I think you wrote this, you talk about attractive fences, and attractive is, there's no definition for what's an attractive something. So I would suggest that you take out attractive.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Can you pull that up again too?
Do you want me to find it again, Kathy?
Yeah, that's enough. I didn't have these pulled out. So that's in the packet that I sent to everyone, Carrie.
Yep. All right.
Sorry.
Am I looking at the right one?
I think it's, there you go. So it says, from the street and abutting properties by attractive fences. So that's not anything that you can't regulate attractive.
Right. And that's why I took out disturbing dust at the top in the middle too. So I don't know where I got the attractive, but
okay.
I pulled that from something.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to take out attractive. Okay.
All right.
That was it for me for zoning.
Do you want me to share purpose and intent or just email it? I did just find it.
Well, why don't you just, given the time, why don't you just send it to me and I'll write this up and send it out to everybody for you.
Okay.
So you are meeting on the Tuesday, the 8th the 9th at 6 o'clock.
Yep, the 9th at 6 p.m. for a quick hour or less on just the purposes of finalize the bylaws.
Okay.
Do we have to send so an agenda obviously will go out for that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
Also, just quickly, so our next hearing, our next meeting on the 16th, we have the public hearing for 1 Lyman Street. Just as a bylaw matter. So just to confirm, the use variance that they were granted negates the need for a special permit there. Is that correct? Bylaw wise?
No, they are, I thought that they had applied for site plan approval and special permit.
I don't think so.
The variance was under the groundwater section.
Yep.
I was just gonna say Fred, right?
Fred ran away. He doesn't want to answer the question.
So my recollection is that the variance was for the use in the groundwater area 1.
Mhm.
Because the only thing that's allowed in area 1 is residential on 80,000 square feet.
Mhm.
So they received a variance, which has since been appealed. And that, it's similar to 425. So, the appeal goes its own path.
Mhm.
And then the site plan approval. And I thought, I advertised it as I always do. It's advertised for everything. So that in the event that, even during hearing, we do this with ZBA too, that if something needs to be added, or it's discovered that, it has to become part of the project, it's already covered by the hearing.
Mhm.
So, or it's covered in the hearing. So I thought, Carrie, that they, I feel like I'm second guessing myself now, because I thought that we as staff had discussed with them that they needed a special permit based on last year's zoning change. Which made, wait a minute, now it's coming back to me. I think Bob, and I'll verify this tomorrow with staff. I think Bob's interpretation for them was that it wasn't considered light industrial. And I think that was the change at last year. So let me just confirm that with Bob before we go down
Sure, no problem. Okay, so, but it looks like, Fred, do you have their application there? What have they applied for? Oh, I can't hear you, Fred.
Fred, you're on mute.
One, sorry.
There we go.
Um,
Oh, Fred, you keep putting yourself on mute. Yes, you do. I think
David showed me a trick that if you just hit the press bar, you can momentarily take yourself off mute. But I keep taking my hand off the press bar, the space bar.
Real good trick.
Terrific. So the application is for site plan approval, the one that was recently submitted. But I was looking through the application to see if they submitted their zoning interpretation from the building inspector, and I don't see it.
Okay.
All right, like I said, I recall a conversation or email with Bob, but again, I'll verify that tomorrow.
Okay, that's no problem. Great. And then, Michelle, when's your next design review meeting?
We're deciding that now.
December, I'm sorry, December. March 18th?
Yeah, we think it's going to be March 18th. We've got 3 out of 5 yeses.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So it sounds like they're coming back to you anyway, and that's after we meet with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, they need to, they are on their second, and they're going to work on more of their landscape, and then, making their building look a little bit more residential in an industrial area. I don't know how you do that, but they're trying.
Okay. All right, great. Is there anything else that we need to cover this evening? Any A&Rs, bonds, lot releases?
Not for me.
Okay.
Not on my list.
Okay, so why don't we skip the minutes for this evening since it's so late and we had a couple other things we wanted to do. I think it's too late to get into anything new. So why don't we, if that, unless anybody has a real, sorry?
One, but I'm just wondering if we get through non-conforming quickly and stick to our hour, maybe we should try to do the minutes next Tuesday, just to get them out of the way.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we have so much on the 16th.
Okay, sure.
But if we can't, we can't. It was just, I'm just throwing it out there.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so if we just add old business minutes, if when it's there, if we need it. Okay, I think that's all I had. If there is a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, all in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks so much.
All right.
Night.
Good night.